Yes.
This takes a little bit to start up because it takes a little while before it starts to record. Shoot, I forgot my headset.
Everybody, this is a public meeting of the Board of Adjustment of the Borough of New Providence, County of Union, and the State of New Jersey. Adequate notice of this meeting has been given in accordance with Public Law 1975, Chapter 231, in that a notice was made in conformance with Section 13 of the Act. I'd like to introduce our Board Secretary, Margaret Kuntz, and ask Margaret if you please take attendance.
Chairman Nadelberg,
Present.
Mr. Amotsville,
Present.
Ms. Gagliola,
Present.
Mr. Grove,
Mr. Grove is here.
Mr. Morgan,
Here.
Mr. Ping,
Here.
Mr. Sorokin,
Present.
and Mr. Rossi.
Here.
Thank you. Also representing the borough this evening are our experts, Keith Lynch at the table to your left, our zoning official, and sitting next to him is McKinley Mertz, our professional planner. At the table on the other side to the right is Marie Raffay, our professional engineer. You'll also notice that we have Amanda Wolf sitting right next to me, our board attorney, who is going to guide us through all our legal issues that we might have this evening. If you're scheduled for a hearing before this board tonight, it's most likely because you do want to make changes to your property that are for some reason not in compliance with our local ordinances. At this meeting, you'll be asked to give sworn testimony describing what it is you wish to do, where you run into challenges with the ordinances of our borough, and why you feel you should be granted variance. Members of the board will then ask you questions about your plans and requests. Through our questions, we're assuring that the information necessary either to approve or deny your request is made part of the public record. Please note that any comments made by any one or more of the members of this board are simply their own opinions. Those opinions should not be construed as the board's suggestion to you to try to change your design of your application in any way, shape, or form, nor does your decision to act upon that opinion or suggestion guarantee the board's approval of your application. After our questioning, we'll open the floor to anyone else who wishes to ask questions that pertain directly to the testimony given. Those questions must only be challenges to or clarification of that prior sworn testimony. At the end of all testimony and questions, there will be time for personal comments from the public, either for or against the application. Two things to note. A lot of the members of the public are here this evening. I just want to let you know that if you're here to hear the traffic testimony, it is likely that will not be gotten to this evening. And also the public comment, which comes at the entire end of the end of the entire hearing, will not take place tonight because we expect this to go at least one more meeting. So just for your edification. Everybody's been noticed properly?
Yes, for the record, I did review the notice as to form and content. It was mailed August 9th. It was published August 9th, and the hearing is today, August 21st, so the board does have jurisdiction to hear this case.
So this is the Redwood ERC New Providence LLC 535 and 603 Mountain Avenue hearing. Mr. Pentel is the attorney. Please tell us what you've got.
Great, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be before this board again. It's been a couple of years. It's nice to see a number of familiar faces, and I will be more than glad to tell you what this is all about. The application is for the applicant, of course, Redwood ERC New Providence LLC, an affiliate of Erickson Senior Living. The application is for amended preliminary and final site plan approval. The subject property is lot 18.01, 24.62 acres at 575 Mountain Avenue. That 24.62 acre parcel, of course, is the site of the previously approved, what we call Neighborhood 2 of Lantern Hill, continuing care retirement community. So throughout the evening, you'll probably hear references to Neighborhood 1 and Neighborhood 2. Neighborhood 2 I just described as the newly proposed portion that hasn't yet been built. Neighborhood 1 is the portion on the adjacent lot 17.01, 535 to 603 Mountain Avenue, which is, of course, fully existed and built out. Where before, on, as I said, application for amended preliminary and final site plan approval, which essentially reduces the overall density, scale, and scope of the project that was previously approved by the board in its resolution issued July of 2021. For example, the density of this project is being reduced from 554 independent living units previously approved on lot 1701 to now a newly proposed number of 444, a reduction of 110, or almost 20% reduction in the number of independent living units in neighborhood 2 on lot 18.01. There's also, I should note at the outset, the potential, as we've indicated in the application materials, to have the option of converting 45 independent living units in either the proposed neighborhood 2 or the existing neighborhood 1 to 85 healthcare units in the event that they're needed on, again, either lot 1701 for neighborhood 1 or lot 1801 for neighborhood 2. So the numbers generally are where there were decreasing the number of independent living units from 554 to 444, and we are proposing previously approved on lot 18.01 neighborhood 2. There were 108 healthcare units in a separate continuing care building. That's no longer proposed. So in lieu of that separate building housing 108 healthcare units, we're simply proposing to have the flexibility, as I said, to convert up to 45 independent living units to 85 healthcare units in the event that that's needed. We're motivated by a few different factors here. One, you can see the project has gotten smaller as a result of feedback that we've obtained from within the community, as well as market research that we have done. There's generally a feeling of more green space being a desirable feature. We're also proposing a number of additional amenities for the project. The Life Enrichment Center building, which is now proposed as part of the new neighborhood 2, will include, in addition to a whole host of amenities previously included for various dining and fitness facilities and the like, the new neighborhood 2 will also include a creative arts studio for sculpture and craft-like work, a salon and barber shop facility, an outdoor fitness terrace, a new outdoor courtyard space adjoining the Life Enrichment Center that you'll hear a little bit more about from our architect and engineer, a single pickleball court, a dog park, as well as resident gardens that some of the residents can use for planting their flowers or perhaps most likely vegetables and the like. So that's the reason we're back for the proposed change. Across the board, there's really no increase in the scale or intensity. It's strictly across the board a decrease in intensity and size of the project. So as you'll hear later from our traffic expert, not tonight, but at our next meeting, there's obviously going to be reduced traffic. There's going to be substantially enhanced setbacks and reductions in coverage that I'll talk about in a moment as well. Additionally, on lot 1701, the existing neighborhood 1, we are proposing a new gatehouse, which will be at the main entrance that you're probably all familiar with, that comes in essentially the driveway at Mountain Avenue. The two driveways on either side of the facility, Southgate Road and South Street, will be for employees and residents only, just as the previously approved Southgate driveway was, many of you recall. Those two driveways will have Gate-controlled access limited to employees and residents. All visitors, deliveries, etc., will go to the main entrance where there will be a newly proposed gatehouse. You'll see the architectural features of that. We added an additional lane for ingress traffic there to avoid any stacking issues and the like. We are still prepared to abide by the condition of the prior approval to have, prior to occupancy of the third building, a left turn lane installed in the county, adjacent county road, of course, Mountain Avenue. No change in that respect either. So the prior approval, as I indicated, was for some 554 independent living units and 108 healthcare units, now down to 444 independent living units and no new healthcare units. The waiver and bulk variance relief, also very similar to what you've previously seen. We previously had a variance to construct a security gate at the South Gate Road entrance. Same, no change requested in that relief. It's the same variance with respect to the setback there, so no new variance needed. Likewise, the board members may recall there was a waiver previously granted to permit illumination of 1.8-foot candles at the South Gate Road driveway for safety purposes. I think the ordinance proposed a limit of 0.5-foot candles at a boundary line. Again, same level of illumination, same safety issue, no change in that. So no new waiver required in that respect. That element of the plan is the same. We also previously had a variance approved to permit a freestanding monument sign at the intersection of Southgate and Mountain Avenue, i.e. not at an entrance to the site. That variance was also approved with the condition that there be directional language put on the sign to direct vehicles approaching that sign to the main entrance on Mountain Avenue. So you didn't want that to be used to attract traffic to the driveway on Southgate Road because obviously that's limited to employees and residents. We've added that required directional language on that sign, so it will say next left, Lantern Hill, next left turn, something to that effect. And that will be a one-faced sign facing traffic coming from the west. So as they come from the west, they see that sign, they'll know their next left-hand turn is the main driveway. We haven't moved the location of that sign. Our engineers will confirm that given the fact that it's one-faced, facing eastbound traffic coming from the west, and given its location, it would work well in that location to direct vehicles to the driveway at Mountain Avenue. There's one new variance with respect to building length for building 2.2, where the ordinance allows a maximum of 200 feet generally, except maximum building length of 340 feet is permitted where a parking deck is included under the building. That ordinance is kind of a remnant of, I think, older ordinances which were trying to prevent extra long garden apartment monolithic facilities. We have buildings that are as long as that, but do have parking decks under them. This one particular building, though, building 2.2, does not have a parking deck beneath it. So to be at 311 feet would not be allowed under the ordinance. What that does, the aesthetic of that building, though, I have to emphasize, is absolutely comparable to the aesthetic of all the other buildings. The variance would really not be perceptible to anybody walking through the campus. In fact, the building might actually even be more aesthetically pleasing in the sense that it doesn't have, the proverbial hole in the wall for a garage entrance. And obviously, all the residents of that building will have the convenience of parking their cars under building 2.1 with a direct walkway from that parking garage into a very nice living area in building 2.2. So it's not like they're coming into a basement or something like that. It should be pretty seamless. The architect will testify about that. Generally, we are fine with all the prior conditions of approval. I don't think I need to go through all of them right now unless you'd like me to. There were 16. I can tell you we're in the process of addressing one or two with your professionals, but generally across the board, number one, we don't envision any issues anyplace, number one. And number two, we'd be glad to get into the details, but I don't think I want to take your time on that right now. But again, no serious changes. What I'd like to do.
If you don't mind, I don't know, I would like to hear the conditions and
Sure.
have them read into the record.
No problem at all. I'd be glad to
As
do
well?
that. It won't take that
Is
long
that
at all.
okay?
Thank you for the comment. And please, anybody, feel free to interrupt me anytime with any questions as we go through this. So here are the conditions from the prior resolution. There were 16 of them. Number one, to conduct operations in accordance with the plans and testimony presented to the board. No change. Number two, installation of 36 additional trees and plantings, and in some areas, installation of larger trees and plantings. We will do that. In fact, we have that actually was referring to it, what at the time was an Exhibit A21, which identified the specific additional 36 plantings within the site. We have the analog of that, a revised new exhibit, because obviously the configuration of the roadways and buildings has changed somewhat, but you'll see from that new exhibit that's very comparable in appearance and achieves the same purposes as were intended to be achieved by that old Exhibit A21. Number three, earlier installation of landscaping along the perimeter to allow more growth and screening at the time of occupancy. No change. We agreed to do that before, and we agree again. Number four, installation of security gates at the South Gate driveway. I just mentioned that. No change. Number five, prohibition of delivery truck and jitney usage of the South Gate Road entrance. Again, no change. We can still live with that condition. Number six, addition of directional information on the monument sign. Directional information will be added. I've already mentioned that we've done that. We are not proposing to relocate the monument sign, which actually was condition number 7. And I just explained why we're not proposing to shift the location of the monument sign. Number 8 was board jurisdiction over maintenance of the landscaping plantings for 5 years from the date of issuance of final C of O. No change. We agree to that. Number 9, revision of the site plan to show that the sidewalk on Mountain Avenue will meander around the trees. Again, no change. The plans will achieve that. Condition number 10, maintenance of the gates on South Gate Road, which shall not be left in the upright condition. Again, agreed to that condition. Number 11 was pre-screening of sanitary sewer discharge on the entire site for both neighborhoods 1 and 2 to be coordinated with the borough engineer. We are in the process of addressing that item to see exactly how we will comply with that requirement, exactly what that pre-screening will entail. And we've actually met with your engineer on that point. We will be prepared to address it, I'm sure, in more detail at the next meeting to flesh that out. Number 12, compliance with all escrow and bonding requirements for improvements. Of course, no change. Number 13, compliance with statewide non-residential development fee act. Again, will comply, no change. Number 14, subject to all other permits and governmental approvals, including Union County Planning Board and New Jersey DEP. Again, we'll obtain all applicable permits. No change in that respect. Condition 15 was that any variances granted will not constitute authority to engage in any construction not authorized by the zoning ordinance. Of course, essentially boilerplate will comply with that. And number 16, submission of a tree protection plan addressing construction activity subject to approval by the borough engineer. And again, we will do that. Obviously, the location of plantings and the like has shifted a little bit. The plan looks very similar to the prior plan. There are now 4 buildings proposed rather than 6. So again, locations will change, but generally the layout is very comparable to what you had before. So I'd like to do for a moment is just bring your attention to that Exhibit A1, which is up on the screen. If you can zoom in a little bit on it, Tyler, from the top, that would be helpful. So just as by way of example as to what I was referencing in terms of reductions of density, et cetera, on lot 18.01, our density was previously approved. There you see it right in the middle of the page there at 18, was previously approved at 23.8 units per acre. It's now proposed at 18 units per acre. And by the way, if that conversion of 45 ILUs to 85 HCUs happens on lot 1801, the density actually goes down because under your ordinance, a healthcare unit counts as 1/3 of a unit for purposes of the density calculation. So we would be losing 45 independent living units and gaining 28 1/3 healthcare units. That is 1/3 of 85. So the density would actually decrease to 17.4 units per acre if we did that. Building coverage, can you zoom in a little bit on that, please? Building coverage was previously approved at 229. You move the cursor on it so people can see it. There you go. Thank you. Was previously approved at 229,861 square feet, now proposed at 172,996 for a reduction of almost 25%, 24.74%. Total improved coverage right under that was previously approved at almost 500,000 square feet. You see that's 496,793 square feet, now proposed at 445,590 square feet, a decrease of a little over 10%. Parking has likewise been reduced, given as one would expect. We were previously required to have 691 spaces, and we proposed 929. We now are proposing 662 versus 527 required. One interesting point on parking, because a question did come up at the last hearing about the sufficiency of parking within neighborhood 1. We actually, as our traffic engineer will testify, we did a parking study of actual parking demand on neighborhood 1 to see to what extent those parking spaces are being utilized. The conclusion of that study is that, and when we did that, by the way, we took into account utilized spaces in neighborhood 1 and on lot 1801, the site of neighborhood 2, where some employees are parking their vehicles. And the total demand of parking, which was the sum of those parked vehicles on both neighborhood 1 and on lot 1801 by employees, showed that there was a ratio of 0.72 parking spaces maximum demand per unit, 0.72 per unit. We are proposing a parking ratio in compliance with the ordinance, actually even over what the ordinance requires, of 1.50 spaces per unit. The previously approved plans parking ratio was 1.40. So again, we're going to be double, a little slightly over double the 0.72 demand rate expected based upon the traffic engineer's parking study. Side setbacks, if you could go back to that table on the right, please, on our exhibit A1. You can see on Southgate Road north of Ryder Way, for example, that's the first row, that the setback from the building adjacent, and our engineer will get into more detail to show you everything. But to give you an idea of what you're going to be hearing, the side setback for Southgate Road north of Ryder Way was previously approved at 100.7 feet. It's now at 166.58 feet, in change of over 65%. We have a couple of side setback along Southgate Road south of Ryder Way, and the side setback along Ryder Way are very similar to what was previously approved, but in both cases going up somewhat. Next, we have the front setback on Mountain Avenue, was previously approved at 102.4 feet. You put your cursor there. 102.4, and it's now at 121.7, an increase of 18.85%. Our front setback on Mountain Avenue for the Life Enrichment Center was previously 123.2 feet. At that point, it was a continuing care building, the CC building. Now it was proposed for the Life Enrichment Center at 162.3 foot setback, an increase of over 31%. And then lastly, the rear setback, again, you can, the bottom of the table that you're looking at was previously approved at 218.1 feet. It's now proposed at 294. That's adjacent to the residential R1 zone to the rear of the property. So those folks are getting the benefit of an additional almost 35%, a 34.82% increase in setback with respect to that portion of the project. As I mentioned before, a list of new amenities. Addition, we already have amenities included is a fine dining facility, wine bar, a pub
Glenn, I'm so
and
sorry to
tavern.
interrupt you real quickly. I just wanted to double check the setback from Mountain Avenue.
Yes,
The set of revised plans you guys recently sent us said it's 121.7, but you're saying it's 162.3?
there's two
There's two,
setbacks
okay.
along Mountain Avenue that I just called out. So there's one for the Life Enrichment Center is actually at 162.3. That's obviously not the closest one. So I compared the Life Enrichment Center to the prior CC continuing care building that it's replacing. So there, the continuing care building was at 123.2 and about the same location as the Life Enrichment Center, which is now at 162.3. For the building closest to Mountain Avenue, that's on that table as well. It was previously approved at 102.4, and it's now at 121.7.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, there's a lot of numbers coming
A
really
lot of
quickly there.
numbers,
and
yeah.
I had it something different in my chart, so thank
Right,
you.
and the point with the numbers is that they're all going, I would like to believe, in the right direction in terms of increasing setbacks and reducing to some extent project impact. Yes,
And one other thing on the front setback on Mountain Avenue,
yes.
the previously approved 123 feet for the continuing care building, how tall is that building? And the 162-foot setback for the Life Enrichment Center, how tall is that building?
Yeah, our architect will have that information at his fingertips in a second for you,
thanks.
okay?
Thought you might have known.
Mr. Pantel, since everyone seems to be interrupting you, I have a question for you. Is this an exhibit or is this something that was already submitted to the board?
This is an exhibit. We've called it out as A1, so I'd like to have it marked as A1. And we'll get you a hard copy and we'll get you, of course, electronic copies as well. So just to identify it for the record, if you could scroll out on it just for a moment, zoom out on it a little bit. So it's entitled, you get the title block in there, please? There you go. Comparison table, sheet CO2. And we've already labeled it Exhibit A1 with today's date on it, 8/21/23.
Thank you.
Can I continue to interrupt?
Sure, please.
The first two on that table call out right-of-way distances.
Yes.
I don't know how right-of-way comes into play on this application because it's Southgate on two
think
sides
they're
of your
using-
property, right?
They're using right away as it's like a waypoint. South of right away on Southgate. The setback is to Southgate.
Right?
Yes.
Setback to
Two set, it
Southgate,
doesn't, okay,
north of Ryder,
Right.
and then setback to Southgate,
okay.
south of Ryder.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just one to Ryder, which is just that one little piece in the middle.
The intersection.
Okay, but basically your point by Mr. Amisbol is absolutely well taken, is there most importantly as a line of demarcation. So we have setbacks north and south of Ryder Way. There also will be involved in the application a D1 use variance on lot 17.01 because as I previously mentioned, we are proposing a new gatehouse, a new arm control for the driveway on the South Street driveway, as well as additional driveway lane to accommodate the gatehouse and some associated landscaping and the like, and any other improvements that might be shown on lot 1701. The use variance, of course, is for a use that has been found many times by this board to be an inherently beneficial use, which of course is consistent with the case law that addresses this type of use. So it automatically, of course, satisfies the positive criteria, just as you would have for schools, nursing home, hospital. It's definitely inherently beneficial use. Not surprising given the important healthcare purposes that are served by the project, as well as by us providing senior housing, of course. Minimum age of move-in, by the way, is 62, and average age of move-in over the years, I believe, has been about 80 years old. So there were previous use variances granted for the development on lot 1701 on at least 3 separate occasions in 2012, 15, and 17, and prior resolutions which have been provided to the board. This grant obviously is not increasing intensity on lot 17.01. In fact, obviously you have overall a decrease in the intensity and density of the CCRC in neighborhood 1 and neighborhood 2 combined. The gatehouse will definitely promote safety and security of residents. It will be controlled 24 hours a day, manned. We would expect 12 hours a day, and the 12 hour from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And the hours when it's not manned by somebody in the gatehouse is controlled by somebody in the front control security office 24 hours a day. So if somebody comes to pay a visit after those hours, they'll be able to communicate with the security people at the front desk. We also have security patrol 24 hours a day to control that. So it definitely will promote safety and security. And it's obviously quite strategically located at that main entrance driveway. The witnesses that we will be presenting include Tyler Depew, our architect from Lance Baggio, same architectural firm that we've used for the applications in the past. You may recall Dennis Baggio had previously testified on various applications. He's since retired, but Tyler Depew has been handling this project from its outset. Rob Strecker from Bowler Engineering, our civil engineer who's testified on the last go-round. Amal Deshpande, our landscape architect from LSG Landscaping Architecture, the same firm that we used previously. John Harder from Atlantic Traffic and Design, who also testified previously, and Michael Tobia, our professional planner, who likewise testified on the prior application. So with that said, what I'd like to do is call Tyler Depew if there's no additional questions.
Mr. Patel, I just have one clarifying question. I think earlier in your opening statement, you
Yes.
talked about the left-hand lane off Mountain Avenue.
Right.
That is still proposed?
Yes, the site plans still will show that. In fact, it was asked that we show it specifically on the plans, so we have no problem with that. It's proposed, just as it was previously, for occupants to be installed before occupancy or in connection with occupancy of the third building.
Okay.
It's controlled by the county, but we will be pursuing that with the county definitely in time for occupancy of the third building.
Thank you.
Okay. So next, I'd like to have Mr. Depew come forward. And by the way, be ready, please respond to Mr. Braud's question about the height of the CC building.
Yep.
Okay, of the Life Enrichment Center building. Great, thank you. So for the record, please, Mr. Depew, could you state your name, nature of your involvement, and your qualification? Oh, we need witnesses to be
Swear,
sworn,
thank
sorry.
you. Can I also swear on our board professionals? Do you all swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God?
I do.
I do.
Perfect. And if you could just qualify Mr. Depew as you go.
Of course. So please state your name and your professional qualifications and your background on this project.
Thank you. My name is Tyler Depew. I'm a partner at Lance Baggio Architects based in Denver, Colorado. Firm has been around for 40 years. I've been practicing with the firm for 10. In that time, Lance Baggio has become nationally recognized as a leader in the design of senior living environments. And our firm has been working on the Lantern Hill campus since its inception about 10 or 11 years ago.
Could you just pull the microphone up a
I
little
was
bit?
just going to say this. Ask the same
Thank
thing.
you.
And are you licensed in the state of New Jersey?
I am.
Is your license in good standing?
It is.
Thank you.
And your professional address?
5650 DTC Parkway, Englewood, Colorado, 80111.
And how long you've been practicing?
I've been practicing 25 years.
So we would ask that Mr. Depew be accepted as an expert in the area of architecture.
Without any objection from the board?
No.
Great. Okay, thank you.
As Glenn has outlined, we're here tonight to address the amended preliminary and final site plan application for the Lantern Hill community. Again, I think what you're going to hear from all the witnesses this evening, the common theme is just going to be reduction. We're building less. As previously stated back in July of 21, this project was approved for a total of 6 buildings and 662 total units. independent and healthcare combined. We are now proposing 444 units in a total of 4 buildings. With that reduction in overall density, obviously our site has loosened up quite a bit. And that was really some direct feedback from the residents of Neighborhood 1 as they wanted more opportunity for those outdoor amenity spaces. So some of those outdoor amenities that have been added to the Neighborhood 2 design that were not in the plans previously dating back to the 21 approval, outdoor pickleball court, a dog park, resident gardens similar to what was provided in Neighborhood 1. As Mr. Pantel mentioned previously, inside the building, there's the addition of a salon, the creative arts classroom. There's a rooftop fitness terrace associated with an indoor fitness space, and the maybe enlarged or enhanced interior courtyard that's really surrounded by all 4 of the Neighborhood 2 buildings. That space didn't really exist before, and that was really all driven by the density of the previous design. Obviously, as the architect, I will touch mostly on the architecture of the buildings. We do have other witnesses that will speak to the engineering and the landscape. If anybody's not familiar with the site, this is an aerial. Obviously, you can see the 6 buildings to the right with those. And I apologize if this is a little small to see, but
You can zoom in a little?
And just for the record, is this a new exhibit? Or?
Yes, yes.
yes.
So
This
this is an aerial exhibit. We've already marked it as Exhibit A2 with today's date. It's on Bowler letterhead. It's entitled Aerial Exhibit Redwood-ERC New Providence LLC, New Providence, New Jersey.
So with the longer white roofs that you're seeing on the right side of the site, that obviously neighborhood number 1 with its 6 buildings, and our proposed development on lot 18.01 to the west of that. You can see in this image that the previous structures have already been removed. Moving on to Exhibit A3. This is an overall rendered site plan provided by Bowler Engineering, with the colored portion of the site on the left representing our lot 18.01.
Again, for the record, this exhibit is entitled Overhood Neighborhood Layout Plan, sheet number C103, and it's a color rendered site plan with Neighborhood 2 in color, Neighborhood 1 next to it in largely black and white, except colored portions showing the new facilities associated with the gatehouse and the South Street driveway.
This starts to give you a good overall layout of the new proposed design. Again, the reduction from 6 buildings to 4, starting at the bottom right and moving around clockwise, is 2.1 up in front. That has the Life Enrichment Center attached to it. To the west is building 2.2, and then going top right is building 2.3, and is finished with building 2.4 at top left. The previous question about heights and how it related back to setbacks. The previous care center was 4 stories, and that was previously the closest building to Mountain Avenue. And now our closest is the community center, or the Life Enrichment Center rather, and that is 1.5 stories.
Mr. Depew, if you just want to stay in the seat, please.
Oh, thank you.
Just speak into the microphone.
I was about to suggest that. Yeah, be comfortable. Go ahead.
So again, with the reduction of 6 buildings to 4 and 662 units to 444, none of which are healthcare units. We touched briefly on the added amenities, both site and interior to the buildings. Moving on now, we will look at some architectural renderings of the new design. This is a view of RB 2.1. The main entry, this
Could you
building.
explain the exhibit before you describe it?
Yes, thank you. This is Exhibit A4, dated August 21.
Right, and it's captioned, excuse me, 2.1, so just referring to building 2.1 entry, Lantern Hill Neighborhood 2.
You'll see the architectural character is very in keeping with what was established on Neighborhood 1. The use of brick and stone veneer and lap siding, all very familiar and comfortable to the residents, and we've very much kept in that same architectural style. In this view, off to the left side in the distance, you will see the Life Enrichment Center. Again, that is about a 1.5-story building in height. 2.1, as we see in this rendering, is a 6-story building with 2 stories of below-grade parking. Moving on to the next rendering, labeled Exhibit A5. It's labeled 2.2 South View. So we've moved just west. We've moved just west on the site. This is, again, the south view of Building 2.2. This is a 4+1 story. What I mean by the +1 is the lowest level is a split level. That's all driven by the topography of the site. So we are seeing the 4-story portion of the building. Again, this is the south-facing elevation looking towards Mountain Avenue. Moving on now, we are interior to the site. This is Exhibit A6, labeled 2.1/2.3 Courtyard. We are, again, interior to the site now. We're pretty much surrounded on all 4 sides by the 4 buildings of the Neighborhood 2 design. What we see in the distance is the north side of Building 2.1. There is a rooftop terrace there in the distance. And off to the left, we get a glimpse of Building 2.3. This is Exhibit A7, labeled 2.3 West. We are looking due east at the west elevation of Building 2.3. This is a 6-story building with 2 levels of parking below. One entrance to the lowest level of parking is down here in the bottom left-hand corner. The entrance to the upper level of parking is in the distance here on the other side of the building. This gives you a pretty good feel for the interior courtyard, which was not present in the previous design. That was really all driven by the density. When we had 6 buildings on the same acreage, we just didn't have this opportunity. You'll see a small amphitheater type of structure in the middle here. That's really just meant to give the residents a place to congregate. Obviously, lots of walking paths through this area and trying to create a real sense of space and place for the Neighborhood 2 residents.
Could you comment on Building 2, the size of Building 2.1, specifically its length, as I referenced it in my opening remarks, and
Sure.
discuss the aesthetics of that and what we're achieving with the design of that building with respect to the variance relief that we're seeking?
Yeah, some of the existing zoning language limits a building without parking garage underneath to 200 feet on any given elevation of the building. 2.2 is the one building in Neighborhood 2 that does not have structured parking below it. And the north elevation of that building is currently 311 feet long. We feel, again, the intent of that language was to prevent those long blank building facades. And we feel, in what's demonstrated in Exhibit A8 that's on the screen now, this is specifically, it's labeled 2.4 South, sorry. This is the south elevation of Building 2.4. We do not have a rendering with us. We can certainly provide one. But the north elevation of 2.2, which is the building in question, which requires the variance, is...
I'm sorry, I said 2.1. I meant 2.2.
The architectural flavor of the north wall of 2.2 is very much in keeping with this south wall of 2.4. And they face each other if we went back to a site exhibit. We feel the architectural, the materiality, the forms, the roof lines, we feel that is very much in keeping with the intent of the original zoning language, again, to prevent that long blank facade of uninterrupted building.
Just for clarification, is this an interior building or is this 311 feet facing Mountain Avenue? Or?
No, good point. The elevation in question where we're requesting the variance is inward facing.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just a steel and mortar type construction. For the buildings?
This is all non-combustible. It's load-bearing metal stud walls, concrete on joist for the floor structure. So to continue, some of that zoning language states that in a building where a garage is not present, if you do exceed 200 feet in length, which we do, we're 311, it says that the introduction of a firewall would be an acceptable way to get around that excessive length. We've studied it at length, and first of all, the size, the footprint of building 2.2 from a building code perspective does not trigger the need for a firewall. So it is our opinion that the introduction of a firewall to 2.2 just to stop and reset the measurement of that north facade it would be completely imperceivable from the outside of the building, first of all. And with the building codes not requiring it, we feel it just isn't the intent of the zoning language. So again, the exhibit that's on the screen now, Exhibit A8, labeled 2.4 South. This is the south elevation of the last building in Neighborhood 2, Building 2.4. There is some ordinance language that I wanted to touch on. There are 12 items that we want to very quickly touch on. It won't take long.
Well, before you get to that,
Yes,
you want to proceed to address elevations for 2.4 South as well as the gatehouse?
We can go to the gatehouse now if you'd like.
Yeah, you have a rendering
Okay.
of that. And A8, do we mark A8?
Yeah, we touched on the A8 very
A8,
briefly.
okay.
Yep, south wall of 2.4.
Right, okay.
So the last architectural rendering we have, Mr. Pantel touched on the gatehouse that is being added to the entrance along Mountain Avenue. We will have other exhibits that maybe tell the story a little bit better of traffic, both inbound and outbound. We just wanted to give a feel for the architectural. It's obviously a very simple building. And of course, we're using the same materiality that are on the buildings of both Neighborhood 1 and Neighborhood 2 because they are shared.
So that Exhibit A9 is labeled Gatehouse, Lantern Hill, Neighborhood 2, already marked as A9, right?
Correct.
Mr. Pentel, I think you said in your opening remarks, this gatehouse will be manned 24/7.
The gatehouse will be manned 12 hours a day from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at the gatehouse. And then from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., it will be controlled by live humans in the security office in the building. So if somebody comes after hours, they will be able to communicate from the gatehouse to the security office, which will then make a determination as to whether or not they'll be admitted. And if so, under what circumstances or under what conditions, because we also have security personnel patrolling the site 24/7. So the person attempting to enter at that point might need an escort, maybe an emergency service person as well, who will obviously be given immediate access by virtue of communication with the gate, with the security office. And I would also add too that in any number of emergent situations, the control office in the building will probably have advanced knowledge of the arrival of an emergency vehicle. Maybe not 100% of the time, but for a majority of the time, maybe close to 100%. So there at all times will be a live human being in control of that gate, either in the building from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. or as at the gatehouse building from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. or in the main security office inside the main building from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m.
Thank you.
Mr. DePew, are you the correct witness to answer why the decision was made to include a gatehouse when it wasn't in 2021, or is that somebody else?
I can touch on it. It's really resident demand. There have been surveys, there have been town halls in the Neighborhood 1 community that the residents want it. And even since the 2021 application and approval, it has become Ericsson's standard to provide gatehouses at all of their communities.
So any new development completely from
Yes.
scratch would include a gatehouse now?
Correct.
Do you know, if you don't, that's okay. Is this, because I know there's an entrance now on,
Southgate Road?
No,
it's
I'm
entrance now at
South, on
Street.
South Street. Thank you.
Yes, on the east
Is
side.
the access going to change over there and try to divert more people over here? Do you know?
I believe Mr. Pantel touched on it earlier, but both the South Street entrance on the east and Southgate Road on the west would be adding security arms that would only be used by residents and staff.
Because currently the one on, and I'm sorry if I'm going off in a direction
No,
that's
that's
not your purview, but the one on South Street currently does not have a gate, correct?
Correct.
So that would be added.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So the only place that someone can enter the site who is not an employee or a resident would be at the gatehouse.
Thank you.
I'll touch on the 12 ordinance language items real quick, just kind of a laundry list.
Yeah.
So please stop me at any point.
Yeah, just if I could. So these are provisions of the local ordinance that address sustainability elements. Compliance with them is specifically stated in the ordinance not to be an absolute requirement, so that any deviation from them does not constitute the need for variance on the one hand, but compliance is generally encouraged, and I think you'll hear that we have a very, very substantial compliance. So if you could proceed.
Yes, item number 1, Energy Star appliances shall be utilized in the previous buildings, 1.6 most recently, that yes, the dishwasher specifically has been an Energy Star rated appliance. Where possible, windows shall be oriented to the south. Yes, we do take we take advantage of that, and you'll see in the site plan that most of our buildings are situated east-west to maximize that southern exposure. Utilize high performance glazing to reduce heat gain while admitting light. Yes, our windows are in fact high performance. Double pane glazing with a low E coating to limit the amount of solar heat gain in the summer. Item 4, providing shading devices such as roof overhangs, controllable shades, etc. Shading devices are incorporated into the design on certain windows with a southern exposure. Item 5, use deciduous landscaping to shade the summer sun and maximize heating from winter sun. Yes, most of the trees directly adjacent to the building are in fact deciduous for these reasons. Item 6, ensure that insulation is properly rated. Yes, all insulation R values for this project will meet or exceed the code required minimums. Item 7, install high efficiency HVAC systems. Yes, all HVAC equipment will meet or exceed the code required minimums and all ASHRAE design requirements. Item 8, incorporate thermal mass construction. No, this strategy is rarely utilized in your climate in this part of the country. Item 9, install fully shielded and cut-off light fixtures that are compatible with dark sky guidelines. Yes, all site lighting will comply with dark sky guidelines. Item 10, utilize programmable switches, sensors, or timers to adjust light levels for different times of day and to reduce energy consumption. Yes, all lighting controls will be compliant with ASHRAE 90.1 2019 version. Item 11, install lighting fixtures that utilize LED bulbs or similar efficient models. Yes, most interior and exterior lighting on this project will utilize LED lamps to the extent available in the market today. All lighting design will be compliant with ASHRAE 90.1. The last item.
For the record, could you spell ASHRAE for the court reporter?
ASHRAE.
And it's in all capitals because it's an acronym.
The last item, item 12, use roofs of lighter shades or utilize reflective surface finishes. Yes, all of the primary roofs on the 4 buildings utilize mechanical wells for all the rooftop mechanical equipment. And the membrane roofing within those mechanical wells is in fact either white or light gray to minimize the amount of solar heat gain. And
When you're
that's all I
talking
have.
about roofing, it just came to my mind. I'm just wondering, when you design these, is there ever any thought of doing solar on the roofs since there's massive roofing structures there?
The codes are certainly headed that way. Some states require us to be solar ready, which really just means a pathway up to the roof for future photovoltaic systems.
Is this solar ready?
This project is not solar ready.
And can I just ask a quick question? I remember during the last hearing, we had a shade study done, a shade survey or study. I don't know if the impact or with the reduction of from 6 to 4, does that change it? I'm asking you because obviously the building height, has a new study been done, or we'll be hearing a little bit about that?
Our firm did the original shade studies that you're referencing. It is our opinion that in the reduction of buildings from 6 to 4, also the increase in the building setbacks would, if anything, improve those shade studies
Okay.
on all sides of our site.
I just wanted to hear that. Thank you.
I want to go back to the chairman's question real quickly. What would it take to make even a couple of these buildings solar ready?
It's really simple, actually. It's a singular or a series of empty conduit, electrical conduit up to the roof with a pull string. It's a little more than that, just providing that pathway to get up there.
Is that something we could do for a neighborhood too?
We could certainly study it, yes.
There's a new program in New Jersey that's under a pilot program called Community Solar, and it utilizes large expanses of roofs in commercial or multifamily buildings. It's not a requirement, it's just in the pilot program. But as you said, I think more states and communities are going towards that. And if it's as easy as you say, then it might be a good thought for the future.
Yeah, so, we can certainly confer with the client about that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
If there are no more questions, that concludes my testimony.
More have any questions?
Not a question, request. We know this is going to be going to a second meeting. To Mitch's point, would it be possible to put together at least like a baseline shade study? We spent a lot of time. There were many neighbors that asked about it. Just simply showing what a significant difference these setbacks are going to make, I think will just go a long way.
I think the neighbors would.
To answer the
Appreciate
neighbors'
that.
Well,
questions.
I tell you to go further, it would be good to see the old one and compare and contrast with what you
Yeah.
purport to be the reduction and prove your point.
Well, I think we've heard that, and it's obviously only intuitive, of course, that given the increased setbacks and given the changes in height, there's definitely going to be less shade impact. It's not an ordinance requirement, and our memory of the shade studies is that it was, excuse the expression, a little bit of a rat hole at times. It just kept leading one to another. And at the end of the day, of course, it was concluded that what we're proposing was appropriate under the ordinance. So I question if the board, I hear what you're saying. I'm not obviously not drawing a line in the sand, but I question whether you really want us to start going down that path.
I think it's to your benefit when the public starts asking questions and making comments to be able to shorten that conversation to nearly zero by simply showing this is what it was and this is what it's going to be now. I mean, your setback is changing significantly.
Right.
And I think
course.
your height has gone down on that building that has the closest approach to Southgate too, I think. But that's a question of
Yes, but
specifically
in any
asked.
event, there's obviously going to be less, right?
Yeah, it's going to
Yeah.
be less.
Yes.
And I think you can just kind of put the conversation to bed real quick with like two side-by-side drawings. It's
Sure.
just
Yeah, understood.
thoughts.
Well, of course, it's a matter of form. Needless to say, I need to confer with the client, but I hear you. Understood. And obviously, we don't have any such studies with us this evening.
No, I know. That's why I
Right.
said, we're going to go to a second. It might be
Yes.
a good idea.
Mhm.
Because like you said, we spent a lot of time in that rat hole.
Yeah.
And I'd rather we not, because
Right.
I too agree intuitively, pulling the building significantly further back and making it lower means there's going to be a lot less shade.
Right.
Right? It's a natural thought.
Right. Understood.
Just
Okay.
As
Thank
we
you.
Put the
remember-
issue to bed with a couple
Yeah.
of pictures.
Right. As we
Understood.
remember,
I hear you.
As we remember, though, it was quite a rat hole. So we need to make it simple for you.
I hear you. I hear you.
And I think maybe to make it clear, if you do come back to right on that exhibit, what you're decreasing the setback and the height, so the change is clear. I
Right.
think maybe that'll avoid a few questions as well.
Sure.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions of the architect? Do you want to, got to get you on the microphone up here, please. And again, remember, these are only questions of the testimony given. These are not comments, okay?
Yep.
Thank you.
I'm,
State your name and address.
Yep, I'm David Kaiser from 228 Southgate Road,
And can you spell your last name?
Keyser.
I'm sorry, address again, I didn't get that.
It's 228 Southgate.
Got it, thank you.
And my question is, the architect was referring to the buildings with six stories and two garages, which are the partial floors. But if you could help explain maybe with I believe the ordinance actually states it's to be a partial floor, needs to take up less than 40% of the overall footprint. You can't have it visible from more than two elevations, and it can't face Mountain Avenue. And according to C103, it appears, at least for three of the buildings, those garages take up more than 40% of the footprint, which would make them floors. So you'd actually have two 8-story buildings and one 7-story building, which violates the height requirement.
I believe the 40% you might be talking about has to do with grade plane around the perimeter of the building.
I can read the ordinance to you. So this is ordinance 2019-07, section E4, which is maximum building heights. A1, maximum of 6 stories, exclusive of up to 2 partial building levels below the 6 stories of the structure. And a building level be deemed to be a partial building level and not a story if it meets 3 conditions. 1, it contains no more than 40% of the floor area of the footprint of the building of which is a part. 2, no more than 2 of the elevations are exposed, visible from the exterior. And 3, none of the exposed elevations face Mountain Avenue. So from your drawing on C103, it appears that building 2.1, 2.3, and 2.4, the garages take up more than 40%. Just from the naked eye, it looks to be 50 to 70%. And in building 2.3, 3 of those elevations are visible.
None of the parking garages have an exposed face that is to the south towards Mountain Avenue. That's the first point.
Correct.
I believe the 40% you're referencing is total building square footage and not
It's footprint.
footprint.
That's the ordinance says footprint.
I would have to review that. Section 4A1.
Yeah.
Thank you. We will need to review that further and report back to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of the architect? Yes, sir. Name and address, please.
Alan Swanson, 47 Overhill Road. I have a question, but I missed a little bit. I have a significant hearing loss. I missed a little bit on the solar conversation. My understanding is that the buildings are not planned to be solar ready, the expansion buildings. That's correct?
As they showed up this evening, that's correct.
And your question prompted that there's going to be a review of the possibility of doing that. If I may contribute something to that review.
Unfortunately, not at this point. I don't believe that's proper, correct? We're just
Right,
looking
that would
for-
be a comment. Sounds like you can definitely confer with the architect afterwards if that would be helpful to either or both of you.
I could, let's see, how could I put it in a question? No.
Isn't that so?
Well, I would be, in the end, I would confer with you at the end? Is that who I would confer
If you have
with?
a question for the architect, he's the architect. Yes.
Okay.
You have thoughts or comments?
I guess
You
the
have to say those.
question would be, I'm not sure why there was no consideration at this point of
Excuse me, that's a
putting
comment.
into, making the building solar ready, given
So
that
it's a
we,
question. It's a question as to why there was no consideration.
I'm sorry?
Yes, I'm talking to Mr. Pantel.
Yeah, the gentleman just said he wondered why there was no comment. He's making a comment that there was no consideration apparently given to that.
That was
Well, that's what he
testimony
said.
provided. He said there was no.
He
no
said that it
plans
was
for
not
that.
being,
Yeah.
it was not designed to be prepared for solar.
Right.
Let him ask his creative
Why
question.
not? That's the question.
Well, I can respond that the architect has already been asked if we would consider a solar, making the rooftop solar ready. You heard that he answered that we are taking that under advisement. We'll have to confer with our clients. So I think that would render moot any question about motivation. I don't think there was any suggestion about motivation made here, but we are taking under advisement that comment that's been made.
Thank you. Very good answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, seeing none, you can have another witness come on. But keep in mind also that our last witness will, no further witnesses after 10 p.m. Okay?
Sure,
No
no
new
problem.
witnesses, I should say.
All right, next witness is Rob Strecker, our site engineer.
Be sworn in, please, Mr. Stern.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. And Ms. Brantel, if you could just qualify him?
Yes, could you please state your name and affiliation with Bowler for the record, along with your professional qualifications?
Sure. Robert Strecker, it's Streker with Bowler Engineering. We're at 30 Independence Boulevard in Warren, New Jersey. I'm a 1997 graduate of Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken, where I received my Bachelor of Engineering degree. Since that time, I've been working as a civil engineer, mostly in the land development field. I've been qualified in front of over 110 municipalities in the state of New Jersey, including New Providence, and in front of this board previously.
And nature of your involvement in this project, please?
I am the licensee on the plans. I am responsible for the civil drawings, and my staff is undertaking the design.
Your license is still current in New Jersey as we speak?
Yes, it is.
So, yes, we would ask that Mr. Strecker's testimony be admitted as expert testimony in the field of site and civil engineering.
Without objection from the board, we will accept. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So starting off, this was entered as A2, and I'll just run through some of the surrounding areas briefly, and I'll try not to repeat things that have already been said. But the project's located on the northeast corner of Southgate Road and Mountain Avenue, and this is lot 18.01 on your tax map. It's a former Lindy office building, consists of 24.6 acres in the CCRC overlay zone. As you can see, immediately to our east is neighborhood 1 that Glenn spoke to. Neighborhood 1 is on 17.01 and consists of 26.48 acres of land, and that is in your TBI 1 zone. You can see off to the north of the project area, we have the R1 zone, single-family residential properties along Candlewood, Darby Court, as well as Ryder Way. Immediately to our west,
That's Southgate, not Ryder.
Ryder Way comes east-west. That's right. Yeah, Southgate and Ryder. Yes. Immediately to our west, across Southgate Road, is the planned adult community overlay, and to our south, across facility. For existing, we went over what was previously approved on site before, 544 independent living units and 108 healthcare units. Those were distributed in 6 buildings, as we talked about before, and supported by 929 parking stalls within neighborhood 2. The existing site, as you can see on A2, it previously consisted of 2 buildings which contain offices and research facilities. You can see on A2, those buildings have been demolished, as well as the immediate surrounding parking areas. There are 2 parking fields which remain on the northerly side of the lot. Those are still intact. Important site features as we get into the civil aspect of this. If you recall, Mountain Avenue is higher than the property to the north, so it drops off from Mountain Avenue. The grade change is about 93 feet from front to back. So pretty significant grade change across the property. It's a major design consideration for us. There's also steep slopes between the neighborhood 1 property and the neighborhood 2 property. And if you recall the last time, we interconnected these lots, and we're doing so again today, but also a design challenge. Coupled with that is shallow rock, which is in this area. We have an existing stormwater basin on the northerly side of the site. That basin over time has silted up and accumulated soil. So basically, wetlands have been established in those areas. Alongside of the basin, there's also isolated pockets of wetlands. But what you can see on Exhibit A2 is the existing mature vegetation that forms a buffer on the northerly, westerly side and along the Mountain Avenue frontage of the property. That's mature, mostly deciduous vegetation, but it's mature vegetation. We've strove to maintain as much as that as possible. And what you'll see is that in our plans, we're very similar to where we were previously in terms of disturbance in those areas or preservation within those areas. If we could flip over to A3. A3 is the colorized version of the site plan. This is the overall site. So it shows both neighborhood 1 and neighborhood 2. Neighborhood 2 has been colorized for presentational purposes and really jumps out at you at how much green space is actually being offered on this site. This is much less intense than what you previously approved. The next exhibit will have an overlay so you can see exactly what we're talking about as far as dimensions. But again, 4 buildings now instead of 6, and some significant reductions in building coverage and improved coverage and density that Glenn went over in his opening. So I won't rehash all those numbers, but I will say building coverage is down at 16.1% proposed, where 40 is allowable. And improved coverage is at 41.5%, where 60 is allowable. So lots of green space being preserved on the property.
Can I ask quickly, in this image, the darker green, are those the vegetative areas you're trying to preserve?
Yes, they are.
Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you. Total unit count, which I think you've heard a few times now, 444 independent living units on this property, were previously 554. If we could flip to what will be identified as A10. A10 is, you have the notes on exactly what it's called for the record, Glenn?
Yes. Well, you can see on the exhibit, if you go to the title block, it's the existing versus proposed overlay exhibit. And it is on Bowler's title block dated 8/21/23, and we're marking it. It's already been marked there as 8/21/23.
Okay, so A10, this simple exhibit, I think, tells a very significant story as to what's being proposed and offered by the applicant here. If you look at A10, the gray buildings in the background is what the board previously approved. The darker blue buildings are what is being proposed now by the applicant. And you can see just visually looking at it, it's a significant reduction both in the building, it's a reduction in closeness or proximity to the residential areas that surround the property that we're sensitive to. And it also pulls the ring road on the northerly side that went along the basin. We were very close to the basin before. Now we're able to pull that away, and it helps substantially with stormwater, impacts to wetlands, grading on the site. The last time you saw this, there was an extensive amount of retaining walls scattered all through the property. With this change, we're able to eliminate a significant amount of that. We're able to instead focus effort into amenity spaces that'll benefit the community. But just going through some of these key dimensions, if we could, starting at building 2.3 in the northeast corner of the site. The new building is set back 294 feet for 2.3, where previously it was approved at 218. The 218 dimensions just off the top there. As we move our way to the west and we look at building 2.4, the new building is at 166 feet away from Southgate Road, north of Ryder. And previously, we were approved at 100.7. So again, significant improvement there. On Southgate Road, just south of the intersection with Ryder, we have 113.2 feet being proposed, where previously it was approved at, and I lost my dimension there, I apologize, but it's just around 100 feet. That dark line that you see on A10 is the 100-foot setback.
100.7, you're, if you have to zoom out a little bit, you'll pick that dimension up.
Oh, there it
you
is.
go.
Thank you, Glenn. 100.7.
So it was previously approved at 100.7, and it's now at
113. Building 2.2, that's in the southwest corner of the site. This is where the CCRC building, or the CC building was previously, Mr. Grove. Previously approved at 111.9 feet as a setback. If you look at the frontage on Mountain Avenue, previously approved at 123, we're at 121.7. So that one wing of the building is just a hair closer, but the mass of that building has been removed and reduced from the corner. And I'll go over building heights shortly. And again, moving further to the east, 102.4 feet is what the previous approval for the building was in that area. And again, that's been pulled back. The dimension isn't on the drawing, but if you look at the easterly most wing of building 2.1, that's approximately 206 feet off of the right of way of Mountain. So consolidated the site quite a bit. So hopefully that eases some people's concerns.
Mr. Strucker, is the access road, the southernmost access road that runs along the bottom parallel to the mountain, roughly in the same location as your last plan, or has it moved away a little bit from Mountain Avenue?
It's moved away just a little bit, and you could see it on A10. The blue line is the proposed street line, and the light gray line is the prior.
Thank you.
So in that area, we're kind of transitioning away a bit.
And then the grading would have been equivalent or roughly equivalent?
Very, very similar. There were some things, obviously there are different buildings and different garage
Right.
locations, but in general, what we see is that ring road as you move around the Southgate frontage is falling pretty much in line with what we had previously. If you recall, there were areas where there were cuts and there were areas where there were
Right.
fills. And we talked the last time about impacts as a result of that grading, right? We start getting into some of the trees
Right.
around that perimeter. And the amount of trees that we had to remove previously is very similar to what we see we would need to remove today as well.
Thank you.
But all these setbacks are fully compliant. So the plan is fully compliant with all setbacks, all buildings at all points. So completely aligned with your ordinance. In terms of building height, start at 2.4 again in the northeast corner. That's a 5-story building over a 2-story garage. The height of that building is 64 feet 9 inches. Building 2.3 at the northeast corner is a 6-story. No. Is a 5-story building. I apologize. 5-story building over a 2-story garage.
2.3, you said?
2.3, yes.
It says 6-story up there.
2, 3, 6. Oh shit! I'm sorry. I apologize. I got my 2.2s and 2.3s confused. Okay, building 2.4, 5-story building over a 2-story garage located in the northwest corner of the property as being indicated by our friendly architect. The height of that building is 64 feet 9 inches. Thank you. Now moving to building 2.3, which is in the northeast corner. That is a 6-story building over a 2-story garage. The height of that building is 75 feet 5.5 inches. 2.1 down in the southeast corner of the site. That also is a 6-story building over a 2-story garage with a height of 77 feet 5.5 inches. That's from finished floor to the top of the roof for these dimensions per your ordinance. And lastly, building point 2 in the southwest corner is a 5-story building with no garage underneath. And that dimension is 64 feet, 5 inches. Again, building heights fully compliant with your ordinance. Unit breakdown change, talking about, neighborhood 2 is just physically smaller. We talked about the desire to convert some existing healthcare units in neighborhood 1. Convert 45 independent living units to 85 healthcare units in neighborhood 1.
That conversion could also be in neighborhood 2.
Right, and part of the request, even though we're showing that on the plans in that configuration, part of the request is the flexibility to do that elsewhere on the property as well.
Right, so conversion could take place either on neighborhood 1 existing or in proposed neighborhood 2.
Correct. Overall,
Just if you could comment on that. So like, what are you doing there? Would they be halls or when you make a conversion like that, are you converting a whole floor or something when you do that?
Yeah, I think generally that would be the intention, that there would be a wing. It wouldn't be done on a haphazard basis for a patchwork quilt. That wouldn't make any sense. It doesn't work for the residents. So yeah, the intention would be to do it in reasonably grouped clusters, if you will.
okay, so overall, neighborhood 1 plus neighborhood 2, we're looking at 845 independent living units, 170 healthcare, totaling 1,015 units. Previously approved at 1,193, so it's a delta of 178 less units on the property. If we could go to.
Real quickly, sorry, before we move on.
Sure.
The architect was able to show us those very nice renderings where we could see the garage that was exposed. Could you, since we have this nice site plan here, can you highlight which sides of the buildings the garages will be exposed so we can see where we will see them?
Sure.
Yeah, it's just does the darker shade of blue or lighter shade of blue, does that represent where the garage?
I think the darker shade of blue is just because, the lighter shade is because it's been overlaid by the gray buildings.
Yeah, that's what's happening there.
It'd be
And
nice to if the,
Well,
you have
if-
a rendering that shows.
Yeah, if we could flip to A3 real quick, Tyler.
There's one that actually.
I just think this might help.
Our
answer
plans
this.
show, we don't have it on there. But I could speak to this. There's,
Zoom in a little.
yeah, and if you want, we can go building by building, and I'll explain where the garage entries are. Let's start with 2.1. 2.1 is the main building, and Tyler is indicating on A3 where the garage entry is. That is in the northwest corner of the site. There's 2 levels of garage. So the southerly side comes in at 1 elevation. On the westerly elevation comes in at a higher elevation. So there's a grade change occurring between both of those entries. On where do we want to go next, Tyler? 2.2? Building 2.2 in the northeast corner, Tyler.
There's no garage.
2.3.
Can we
I keep
actually
doing
mark
that.
this as an
2-3.
exhibit? And I don't want to ruin your numbering. So
Yeah.
can we make it
Well,
3
what I was-
point something? Would that make
Of course,
sense?
yes, we can do that. So we've already called out this exhibit as a 3. So we can call it out as we're marking it up now to show the locations of the garage entrances as a,
3.1.
3.1.
yeah, let's call it, we were up to A10 so far. Why don't we call it, because we already have an A11, so why don't we call it A10.1?
3.1.
A3.1. Even
Because
better.
it's in the
Fine,
A3 series.
Yes. Well, A3.1, which is the same as A3, but marked up to show garage entrances.
Thank you.
Okay. And I promise I will upgrade my reading glass prescription the next time I pass by CVS. So building 2.3 in the northeast corner, Tyler's indicated the 2 garage locations. The one on the northwest corner of the building is at the lower elevation. On the right side of 2.3 is the higher elevation. It works well with the ramp down from neighborhood 1 coming down into neighborhood 2. It's natural to choose the higher side there. For building 2.4, 2 entries here as well. On the northerly elevation of building 2.4 is the high side. On the easterly side is the lower garage entry. So none of them are facing, obviously, mountain, as we indicated before, and they're all in position to be well screened from the neighbors.
Before we leave that, can you just take a screenshot or something so Margaret will have it? I'm not sure how you want to do it, but
Yeah, well, you can just save that, actually mark it up.
Can I do that after?
yeah, perfect. As long as Margaret gets a copy.
Got to
of it.
submit
Yes.
it, that's all.
Mr. Chair, while you're on this subject, can you just articulate how, what's the percentage of each garage, of total space?
Total space,
Yeah, for each building?
I mean, as far,
Like how, yeah, to help answer the neighbor's question.
I can't give you that number, and I don't think that citation was exactly, I would like to confirm with the ordinance before I address that if I could.
Okay, but you don't know what, I mean.
I don't have the breakdown of the percentage
Conferring
of the
with,
garage.
that's fine, but you don't have the breakdown on how much.
No, I don't, well, I'd like to double check the ordinance before I respond.
And then one last thing on the garage. I know last meeting we talked about emergency vehicles, ambulance getting down there. I think you guys said they could not at last meeting. Is that any changes been made that an ambulance can get into the garage?
To get into the garage?
Yeah.
No, the layout and height of the garage is very similar to the last time. So there's not a plan for ambulance to get in. And like we discussed the last time, it'd probably be more of an SUV that enters the garage if needed to get in there. But we do have.
That's standard for parking garages
Yeah,
generally.
yes, that's my understanding. The
I know. I
ambulance
mean, we
is-
just the incident happened some years ago at Short Hills Mall where ambulance could not get in, and just something that comes up from time to
Yeah,
time.
Understood.
We do have a plan that shows circulation of fire vehicles and delivery vehicles that we'll get to in a second. And I guess we could stay on this exhibit here, but if we could zoom out a little bit, because I want to talk about the ring road and the interconnection. As you can see, the layout for the roadway system is very similar to what you saw before. We are eliminating the existing driveway from lot 18.01. That's the driveway that currently serves Lindy. And we're going to consolidate traffic movements to the existing driveway to Mountain Avenue that's on Neighborhood 1. We're proposing a ring road which ties into the northerly and southerly side of Neighborhood 1 and provides a continuous loop around the entire property now at this point. There's a number of benefits to that. First off is the loading zone, which currently exists on Neighborhood 1, is kind of stuck at the end of a long dead end route. We talked about this the last time. Trucks actually have to back down across the back of the property, and it causes a disturbance. This connectivity will now allow the truck to back in and pull out immediately without having to back all the way across the property. So we've eliminated that issue. It's also good for circulation for emergency vehicles. We're also constructing utilities within that space as well. So we're looping the electrical and the water systems on the property. So it's net positive all around. We are going to construct a dedicated left turn lane on Mountain Avenue prior to C of O on the third building. You can see it's on the exhibit in front of you, and it's also been added to the last round of plans that has been submitted. We had back and forth with the county with regards to the timing for their project to implement improvements at the intersection with South Street. We hoped we aligned better, but it turns out we're probably going first, so we're showing this on our plans now. We are going to reconstruct the Southgate driveway. The location of it is pretty much exactly where it is today. We're just going to reconfigure some of the geometry and the width of it a little bit. We're also adding the security system at that location.
You're showing the Mountain Avenue when you're talking about Southgate, though, aren't you?
It's not.
No, you're not doing it. Somebody is magically showing the wrong.
That's all right. We're getting there in 2 seconds. We'll be there before we know it. So we talked about reconstructing Southgate driveway. Existing emergency access is something that came up the last time too, and I want to point it out. Tyler, we could go a little north and show where that is. we show it in gray. That's really overstating what's there. That is a chained off access that's only utilized for emergency vehicles. It's not for deliveries, neighbors, residents, anyone to use that. But it's a secondary means of access onto the property that we're maintaining.
And that was always used by Lindy, correct? That's been there.
That's been there, yeah. It exists today, and it's just a chain over the driveway or a gate, and we'll install something similar. For pedestrian access, there will be new sidewalks constructed along Mountain Avenue and Southgate Road to tie into the existing. That's something that we committed to at the during the last application. Pathways through the property will be ADA compliant, and when you look at this, you'll see there are stairs that are on some of the pathways. The ADA path actually weaves through the property, sometimes utilizes the buildings and the elevators within the buildings to get from one spot to the other, but it is connected continuous path. And again, some of those challenges are the 93 feet of vertical change that we're trying to deal with. It's virtually impossible to handle that without utilizing the elevators that are being proposed within the buildings.
And will that be clear for any residents who want to take those walks?
It will provide wayfinding signage for ADA accessibility. Yes.
Great. So they'll be able to find the elevators that they'll get them to the next step.
Yes. Yep. And then lastly, as far as pedestrian access goes, we talked briefly about the elevated walkways between building 2.1 and 1.6, which is actually in neighborhood 1. There's an elevated walkway that connects the two neighborhoods. And then within this project itself for neighborhood 2, there's elevated walkways similar to what you saw before. Those are consistent with the architecture and the visual quality of what exists on site today. So it looks impressive. Loading areas. If you recall before, we had 2 loading areas on the property. One was facing Mountain Avenue, which we had a tremendous amount of conversation about. We've eliminated that aspect of it. We've moved the loading to the west side of 2.1. And maybe if we could zoom in on that area a little bit, Tyler, that would help people. So we have a loading area identified. Look on the exhibit where H is, that's kind of where the loading occurs. So that is a loading area for trucks. It's also where the compactor lies in the generator. Compactor and generator are inside the building. So there's actually multiple doors in that area, and the compactor and generator interior to the building, so not visible to the outside. The tractor trailer itself, when it pulls in, actually backs into the building partially. So there's been a pretty significant attempt to try and screen and obscure the loading activity. Obviously, it's not the most attractive aspect of the neighborhood, so we're trying to downplay it and hide it as much as possible. So there's one truck bay in that area. If we could, can we pull up?
Mr. Tucker, so all deliveries, even tractor trailers, come in the main gate?
Yes, all deliveries come in the main gate. If we could pull up C310. C310 is an exact copy of the sheet that was submitted to the board. So you already have this. I don't think we need to mark it as an exhibit. But what this shows is the tractor trailer delivery route to the site and the circulation pattern. So we're able to circulate a truck around the perimeter ring road, which ultimately ties into the driveway on Mountain Avenue. We enter into the parking area to the west of 2.1. We have ample room for a truck to back into that loading space and then subsequently exit and leave the property. There were some comments about visibility of pedestrians and how that interaction occurs. We have striped crosswalks. We have open sight lines and high visibility around those areas. So we think what is being proposed aligns with what people expect to see in these type of facilities. So it'll be open, it'll be clear, and everyone will be able to see everybody else at this location.
And we are promised that those delivery trucks, garbage trucks, whatever, will not be using the Southgate entrance or exit.
They will not.
They can't get out that way either.
No.
North to
Could you
south
use
street.
maybe use the cursor just to show us the kind of the loop and where
The
the
route.
trucks,
The route.
the route? Yeah, thank you.
You want to elaborate on that?
I'm
Yeah,
a
you want me
truck.
to-
How do I go?
You don't have to draw on it, just
No,
No,
I'm
you
just
don't have to
gonna,
draw. I just want to.
just wave or zoom in.
yeah, so here we are. So the truck is entering from neighborhood 1 in this case, circling around the northerly ring road, turning towards the north, paralleling
So
Southgate.
when they enter, that's Mountain Avenue?
No,
No,
That's neighborhood one.
South Street.
that's,
South Street. Okay.
No, that's neighborhood one.
That's the internal roadway for neighborhood 1 that's coming off of.
So they're coming in,
You're not seeing
they're coming in
everyone.
Mountain Avenue
Yeah.
Yeah.
and making a right and proceeding counterclockwise around the property.
They're always coming from Mountain Ave.
They're always coming off of Mountain Avenue.
And
The reason why we show this is because the loading area for neighborhood 1 is located just on the right side of the page. You can see that area. That is where the truck backs in and exits
Okay.
to serve neighborhood 1. So similar truck would continue, circle around and deliver to neighborhood 2, and has room to enter, exit the property. You can see no overlap into parked cars or curbs or things of that nature.
They would be backing up into that location, correct?
Yes, they'll be backing into the loading dock, but that's it. Before, we had a much larger backup maneuver from the ring road back to the loading dock, if you recall. And we were able to eliminate that.
Are there hours of restriction for that to take place? Or will backup alarms be heard in the middle of the night?
I don't know that there's a formal restriction, but the loading generally occurs not during sleeping hours. They don't take deliveries during the middle of the night. There's down periods after the morning rush where it's more feasible to take a delivery, and that's usually when it happens. I can't say that it never occurs during early hours or nighttime hours when people are sleeping, but that's the plan.
Will someone be able to testify to how often those larger deliveries could be expected?
I can tell you that.
Okay.
It's next on my bullet list.
Awesome.
So.
I'm a mind reader.
Yeah, so
That's
for
great.
deliveries, overall campus, now both neighborhood 1 and neighborhood 2, is expecting 6 to 7 deliveries a day. Not necessarily tractor trailer at that level of intensity. Tractor trailer comes maybe 2 times a week, 3 times a week. In addition to those deliveries, about 7 times a day, there's Amazon, FedEx, or similar type of smaller, purpose-driven deliveries that occur. Altogether, it's about a 50% increase over existing. We're kind of doubling the size of the facility, and likewise, the number of deliveries is expanding as well. But again, better screen than what we had previously approved, but still improving circulation through the property. In terms of parking, we're compliant with parking with respect to your code and also with RSIS. In neighborhood 2, 527 parking stalls are required, and we're proposing 662. That's broken up between garage spaces and surface spaces, pretty much in a 70 to 30 split, where 70% is located within a garage. For neighborhood 1, 529 spaces are required, 654 are provided. That's taken into consideration the change from independent living to healthcare units. So overall, 1,316 parking spaces are proposed, where 1,056 are required. That's an excess of about 260 spaces on the property. EV parking, as your planner identified, the approval predates the current EV regulations, so none are required. However, Ericsson does put forth an EV program. They typically provide about 6% of their spaces as EV parking, and that's what they're proposing to do here is allocate 40 parking spaces on the property for future EV. They tend to install them as the residents need them. The way we've allocated those on site is about 20 on the surface and 20 within the parking garage. So what we would propose to do through the construction of this
is at least to provide conduits so we can get to those EV spaces in the future. And if the need arises, they can install them without disrupting the previous construction.
For the ones in the garages, are they going to be pushed towards the way back? Or, because I know, I mean, not just this borough, but in most of the communities I work in, the fire departments would prefer them to be closer to the entrance
Yes.
so that there's easy access.
Yeah, that was, we saw that comment and we're going to comply with the fire department's request.
Great. And if you
So
could,
they'll be closer to the door. though.
perfect. And I think, and I know there's a representative from the fire department here tonight, but also I think wherever you choose to put those 20 spaces, if they could be provided with that plan so that they know ahead of time
Certainly.
where those are located.
Where the high voltage electricity is running.
They might want to know that.
Question on that though.
Yep.
So 40 spaces, hundreds upon hundreds of residents. What do you do for your residents should you run out? Like, let's say more than 20 people who have, assigned indoor spaces have EVs. Is there a program for them to install their own? Or would you just add more? Like, do you top out at 40?
The 40 is not it's not a requirement. Just give me a moment. I talked to my client about that question.
Sure.
I guess go.
And help with hydrogen.
I can tell you, thank you for the moment there, that we've never had a demand for more than 40 a lot. Bear in mind, a good number of our residents come without cars, period. And when they do come with cars, as you might imagine, a fair amount of them are not coming with brand new model cars.
Sure.
So we've never had a situation where we've had to go over the 6%. We feel it's kind of generous. I would say that, Erickson always tries to be responsive to the needs of his residents. But I don't think we can commit to anything beyond that.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's something you should think about, right? I mean, you talk about solar ready. All you got to do is run conduit, right? And a string. And maybe something similar for the parking decks or the parking lots. Just have conduits available so that there's ease of installation. You don't want to find yourself in 5-10 years, or because EVs are premium now. They're not always going to be. They're going to be $25,000 EVs. They're going to be cheap EVs that people are going to want. And then you're going to have a problem because you're suddenly going to go from, well, this newfangled horseless carriage thing that everybody's talking about suddenly takes over, right? And you go from 30 EVs to 120 in the course of a year. I mean, that's just how new technology cycles work.
Yeah, we'll take it under advisement. We'll report back on it.
Well, I guess we shouldn't talk amongst ourselves. So, Mr. Strecker, one more time, I'm a truck and I hit the front gate on Mountain Avenue. I immediately start circulating counterclockwise, go all the way around towards South Street, go around the back to back into the loading dock at 2.1, and then exit again out the main gate to Mountain Avenue.
You can, but it's not, we can accommodate a truck making a left turn off of the driveway for Mountain as well.
Right. Okay. Well,
So it could work in both directions.
it could work in both directions.
Yeah.
Does your truck turning template allow for them to then pull past the loading dock and then back in if you were going in a clockwise direction? I suppose it could.
Clockwise around the site, yeah. I could verify that, but I believe
Yeah.
we reviewed that and it does work.
I mean, because if you're coming in the main gate and heading east, you're going up a pretty significant hill in front of all these other neighborhoods just to get around to the place on the west.
Understood.
Okay.
Maybe a point in time when there might be two deliveries at the same time, or is there only one bay there? And how would you accommodate two tractor trailers?
Yeah, there's only one bay there, so we only anticipate one tractor trailer delivery. Again, it's a couple times a week. It's not a daily occurrence, and it's kind of split between neighborhood 1 and neighborhood 2. So, if it does happen that there's a jam up in that area, we have a wider area of pavement where a truck could lay by on the side temporarily while the other one empties and exits. But the plan is one dock for each neighborhood.
Do all deliveries go there? Like you were mentioning Amazon and others, or do they go to the front door?
Those kind of deliveries most likely will go to the front door. They'll hit the guard booth or the guard shack. They won't hit. They will approach the guard shack off of Mountain Boulevard and then be directed to the correct place. Most likely it's neighborhood 1. But we do show in front of building 2.1 here, kind of a drop-off area by the front underneath the canopy. So there's an area there for Uber Eats or something like that. Okay, and if we could just real quick bring up the fire department vehicle. This is sheet C311 from the plan set that was submitted to the board. And what we've attempted to do here is show accessibility through the main parking lots and to the front doors of all the buildings. Through the course of the development of the project, circling a truck around the perimeter of each building was not contemplated or required. Really, they would approach the front door and fight the fire from that point using the facilities on site. I'm sure the representatives from the fire department would speak more to that. But the circulation through the property is on the plans, and I don't see an issue with that circulation through there. If there's an accommodation that needs to be made for striping or modification to a curb radius or something along those lines, we'll be happy to do that.
And our fire department has seen these plans, correct?
Oh, we submitted them to the town. I assume
Okay.
they're on the distribution. Yes, we received the comment letters.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Question. In neighborhood 1, I believe there was a couple of green paver block
Yes.
areas that reach behind several buildings so that fire trucks can get to the backside of some of these buildings. Are we not considering some of that? Because it looks like there's an area of 2.1, 2.3, which would have to be, the closest you're gonna get is that back driveway in neighborhood 1 with a fire truck. Right?
Yep.
The east side of 2.3, essentially the southeast facade, and then the northeast facade of 2.1 kind of look like they're fairly inaccessible. I mean, I guess you could run hoses a couple of 100 feet, but
Yeah, I think due to the building construction type and the sprinklering and the fire control and that kind of thing, we were never asked to or required to provide a route around the perimeter of the buildings. So the plan was to fight them from within the building, entering the lobby.
That brings up an interesting question, Mr. Streck. Could you circle on this plan, or maybe let's go back to the one that's been already annotated so we can continue to just have some minimum amount of addendums, but yes, thank you. Could you put a dot at the front door of each building? I'm not sure I know where the front, quote unquote, front door would be. I got that one. That one's easy.
That one's easy. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's the front door of 2.2 is there. Okay. That's the front door of 2.4. All right. And 2.3, there's the front door. Okay. Then I'm speaking Mr. Amos-Ball's point. You get an engine to the front door, but sometimes the fire's not at the front door. But you might access upper floors and elevators and stuff through the front door. correct?
Yep.
Okay.
So again, I'd like to also note for the record, I think we can still call that exhibit out as A 3.1, including now also rather large red dots to show the door.
That was for you, Mr. Pantel.
That's why I paid me the big bucks.
So if we could, I'd like to move on and talk about the gatehouse on Mountain Avenue and what we're doing as far as security on site. So all access to the property will be controlled, meaning we have the gatehouse on Mountain Avenue that we're proposing, but the proposed driveway on South Gate, as well as the existing driveway on South Street, will also have gate arms with licensed readers, and those two driveways specifically will be for residents and employees only. So they will be licensed readers at those locations. The gates will open automatically, so very quick movement in and out of the property for those folks. All locations will have a video and audio intercom system that goes directly into the security office on site. Glenn talked about a manned security booth at the front. It will be manned from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Every day of the year.
In the gatehouse.
In the gatehouse. When that person is not physically present, the gatehouse will still be monitored and observed from someone else within the building. And there's also a security team on site. If we could go to A11. A11 is a colorized rendering that's prepared by LSG Landscape Architecture for the property. And I can't read the note on that, Glenn.
Yeah, A11 is identified as the enlargement hyphen entrance in the upper left-hand corner, and it's a colorized site plan showing the location of the gatehouse and the associated lanes of traffic on either side of the gatehouse.
Okay, so the gatehouse is shown, it's noted as number 6. On the plan, that's where the gatehouse is located. It's within an island within the driveway, typical gate configuration from what I'm sure you're used to seeing in different areas. The gate itself is about 8 by 12 feet in dimension, so around 96 square feet. It's 13 feet tall to the peak of the roof and is set back 113 feet from the right of way. So we're outside of the setbacks. We're a rather small structure. It's really a single person, intended for a single person to be located within there. In terms of stacking, Atlantic Traffic has performed extensive studies and will give you testimony about the proper amount of stacking, but they will tell you it's between 4 to 6 vehicles at peak. And we have 2 lanes of 6 vehicles each. The way this is configured is the rightmost lane on the ingress side is for residents and employees only. And again, similar to the side driveways, all those people will have their license plate readers set up, or they will be tagged or have a reader card, proximity card that will allow the gate to open automatically when they enter. Really, the item to talk about is the visitor and delivery lane, which is immediately adjacent to the guardhouse on the ingress. A couple of things can happen when you pull up. If you're a visitor and you show up and you're planned, you go to the visitor lane, security team checks your name is on the list. They greet you, say hello, give you a map, tell you where to go to get you on your way, and you move through very quickly. Likewise, if you're a delivery person, that is a known delivery vendor that comes on the property. They know who they are. They check them, make sure they're valid, and then send them on their way. If you are an unannounced visitor, then what they do is they check with the resident that is being visited and make sure they're aware, make sure everything is appropriate and adequate. If so, they move them on their way. If not, or it requires something or a little bit more time to confirm them, and if there's a buildup, they ask them to simply move to the side and allow the cars to cycle through behind them while they resolve whatever that issue is. If they need to, they have on-site security come down and deal with it, or if they had to, they would call the police.
How are the lanes notated for visitors and residents?
There's little directional signs that will give clarification as to
On
what
the
they'll
ground
be.
or on the stand?
They're pole mounted, similar to what's out on site now. They're rather small blue signs that are around the property.
Do you have a breakdown of how many residents from phase one use South Street or Mountain Avenue? Just curious to see, because I mean, now Mountain Avenue will be the main entrance for, Amazon and deliveries and everybody. And
Yes.
just want to see how many residents are using Mountain Avenue today versus South Street.
I don't have that, but the traffic engineer will give
Okay.
that testimony when they come up.
Can you go back to how if a car's at the gate, right? Let's see where that car number, where the 11 is marked on top of it. And there was an issue and they were unexpected. Is there room with a 15-foot wide access way for them to pull over while another car goes around them? Or would they
No,
pull
well,
through
they would just pull through the gate
and stop where
and,
this
and stop
hash-
on the side where the hash
Okay.
is, or on the side where the curve is. And the expectation is it quickly gets cleared up, but maybe we want to make sure the traffic keeps flowing through. The lanes themselves, 15-foot wide on the ingress movements, 20 feet wide on the egress. And we had talked to the fire department about that to make sure they were okay with those dimensions. I understand that we are aligned on that. When we laid this out, I would say this is much wider than what's existing out there. So we held the easterlymost curb because the trees on that side are kind of nice, very well established. We want to make sure we preserve those. So the sidewalk that you see coming down is the existing sidewalk. And then we held the curb on the east and built everything to the west. So in doing that, we do need to remove 4 trees that are in that area. Our landscape architect can speak a little more to the quality of those trees. There's one that's leaning quite a bit. They're not in the greatest shape. So that's why we elected to move over in that direction. In replacement of that, we're proposing 13 new trees on the west side of the driveway, 7 new trees on the east side. And as you can see from LSG's rendering, above and beyond that, there will be an abundance of planting. This will be quite a highlighted area of the site. It's going to look very nice, and they'll make sure the aesthetics match the rest of the community in this area.
Just one question on your, on the configuration of the entrance and egress. Did you have any consideration of extending the nose of the center island through the crosswalk? So pedestrians crossing in the crosswalk and walking along the sidewalk might have a refuge spot in case they don't make it across the whole way in one shot.
You're talking down on Mountain on that frontage?
Yeah, right by 5, yeah.
They won't make it across because like they're tired or because there's that much traffic?
It's 800 old people there.
They can rest on the side before they start crossing.
Well, you never know when somebody's coming, Hans.
If we can extend it,
I
Jeff,
mean,
we will.
with respect to your turning movements, but I think that either coming in left or right and or pulling out either way, you could extend the nose to the south side of the crosswalk such that there's a refuge for pedestrians to rest.
We'll take a look at it. We'll have to get county approval on it too.
Okay.
And we want to make sure that what we extend is wide enough so it's just not all crosswalk. You know what I
Understand.
mean? So it's not just up, down crosswalk
No, I
and not
understand,
much of a
but
refuge.
it's something, if you would consider that.
That's a good idea. We'll take a look at it.
Thank you.
Regarding the eastbound traffic on Mountain Avenue with the left turn lane, I don't recall, was there any change to the actual number of lanes of traffic then? Are you narrowing it down to 1 at some point to get that left turn lane? Or are there still 2 eastbound lanes?
No, there's still 2. There's a widening on our side.
But they were giving up part of the property.
So that you're giving up more than what currently exists now.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to ask that too, because I think on the other rendering, it showed 1 lane, that the west lanes went down to
Westbound.
1.
Yeah, it was a little confusing, but I think there's
Yeah.
actually a fade line. You can see.
Okay. Yeah, that's why I wanted to add, I wanted
I
to
think
clarify.
I can clarify that. I think what's happened, the reason you may have seen something different from this is essentially 5 lanes, 2 lanes for through traffic plus a left turn lane. The county has been discussing, considering, if you will, a plan that would change some of the some of the striping in Mountain Avenue, not just along our frontage, but for a longer lane where there would be 2 through lanes of traffic, 1 eastbound, 1 westbound, and center turning lanes. So if that happened, we don't control that, obviously. If the county did that, then you could have possibly 3 lanes there, 2 through lanes, and then a center left turning lane into the site. So either way, there'd be a left turning lane into the site. We're not banking on that, so we're showing more conservatively the existing condition with an added left turn lane, which requires widening on our side of the road. If the county did what I just described, probably would not require widening on our side of the road, because there'd be enough cartway in there to have the 3 lanes, including that turning lane.
Mr. Pentel, does it affect the right of way?
No, I think if the county did what I just described, I think they would generally be doing that within the existing right of way. Please don't hold me to the letter of that, because you never know what the
There's
county
no
might
taking.
propose. But generally, my understanding is that happened, we probably wouldn't be engaging in as much disturbance and widening on our side of Mountain Avenue. But as I said, to be conservative, we're not banking on that. We're showing the full 5-lane system, if you will, including the left turn lane.
Well, that's good, because the south side of Mountain is the side that has the complete row of mature oaks and things. And if you can do it within the existing right of way without a taking, then it's just a matter of wiggling some lines, right?
Right, but in any event, it would be, even if we had to do the widening, because if it's a 5-lane system, it's understood it would be on our side of
Right.
Mountain Avenue, on the north side of
Understood.
Mountain Avenue, so as not to disturb what you just referred to on the south side of Mountain.
Correct. Thank you.
Mr. Sugar, how many cars can stack in that left hand?
6.
6, okay.
In the left turn only lane, you mean?
Left turn only, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, left turn only. I'm sorry. I thought you meant the queuing for the
No,
security.
left turn only.
Our traffic engineer will get into extensive detail about that configuration. There's enough room for 2 or 3 cars.
I think at the last hearing, they said that.
I'm just thinking of
He was gonna stack
that
3.
that one 18-wheeler a day comes and,
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a couple more items on this in terms of emergency response. We've been speaking with the emergency responders, and there's a couple different ways that this works. First off is the emergency responders will request their licenses. They'll be programmed, license plates. They'll be programmed into the license plate reader system. So when they come on site, it will open automatically. In addition to that, because we heard feedback that maybe other communities contribute to the response, so we can include them as well, or we can provide card readers, which are like a proximity reader. You throw it in the dashboard of the truck, and it'll open automatically. So
That's important, because I think the police chief didn't want just to rely on license plate readers for emergency vehicles. Those vehicles can be changing at various times, et cetera. So we don't see any harm in including their license plates in the reader program, but it's by no means the only thing we're proposing.
Gates here will be overridden and lifted manually.
they could be. I mean, the gates are not like, they're wooden gates that just go up and down. So I mean,
They're
if they came
controlled by
through,
an
yeah, they
electrical
could.
device of some sort.
Pretty sure a fire
They're
truck. can
controlled,
break into
yeah.
them.
Yeah.
If it doesn't open,
Well,
Pretty sure they're gonna keep
what would
that.
happen? There's basically 2 situations, right? The security booth is manned at the time they arrive, and if it is, the emergency responder comes on site, they open the gate automatically. If their card reader or license reader doesn't work, they'll have immediate access to the site.
What about the one access gate off of, I guess it was Ryder, that's just for emergency? That's a chain link. I mean, what kind of gate's going to be there? Because I don't want to have an emergency personnel go out and try and find the lock to unlock it.
No, I think if that's utilized, that situation is either a guy hopping out of the truck and pulling down the chain, or they drive through it.
it's usually a knockbox or something.
What's that?
It's usually, you usually have one of those knockboxes there that they can give them a key.
With Lindy, it was always a lock.
Was it, oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like the
Yeah.
police will have the key and they open up the box and there's the key for the lock.
My question before was just prompted because if at 2 a.m, if there's a power failure, can
Right.
somebody get through it? That's all.
Yes. Yes, they can. They're not a heavy gate arm. You can lift it. The situation is if the gate is unmanned, if the security booth is unmanned when emergency responders happen to show up and their license readers don't work, what happens? And in that situation, we have the 24/7 remote monitoring on site. We have security people on the property as well. And we have the audio and voice intercom that ties directly into the security room. So they'll be able to get on site without delay. The gates can all be worked remotely. Most of the time when there's an emergency, the community knows that they're coming and they dispatch security to the gate to help them, meet them, take them where they need to go so they get there as quickly as possible. So that's basically how that works. So, I have just a few other points to bring up here. If we could go to A3 again one more time.
Before we do
please.
that, can I ask one more question on that slide?
Sure.
Yeah, I do have some concerns about, I know you said that the traffic, you're going to testify, and I said about 4 to 6 cars, but
Steve, could you pull your microphone up?
sure. That's a 40-mile-an-hour road. There's a turn off south, which is not that far away from the entrance. I don't believe there's a shoulder. Is that right? Is there a shoulder there? I don't think there is.
On South?
No, on Mountain right there.
Mountain?
Yeah.
No, it'll be taken by.
So I do have a lot of concerns about how close the guard gate is to Mountain and potential backup. You imagine a 40-foot trailer there, for example. You testified that deliveries would be doubled, and that would be probably okay, but a guard, gate does not exist currently.
Right.
So doubling deliveries and adding a gate, and you met Uber drivers and people that the guards aren't familiar with. I'm concerned that there's going to be a lot more ID checking and hullabaloo around there. Why not make the gate, further on the interior? Had you considered that? Again, it's a very dangerous road, frankly, 40-mile-an-hour road there.
Yeah. Our traffic engineer is prepared to address all those items exactly, so I'll let him do it when he comes
Yeah.
up. But we did look at moving the gate even further into the property. The grade in that area becomes prohibitive. That driveway's fairly steep, and in the middle of that, we're able to kind of carve out a flatter spot so you can park your car and talk to the gate attendant.
And I can tell you too, to respond to your question, good question. We actually did study queuing at another Erickson facility at Cedar Crest Village in Pequannock, which is even larger than this will be once this doubles. I think they're considerably larger. And our traffic expert has the results of that and can testify to queuing. Don't forget, please, that we also are adding an additional lane for employees and residents, the far right-hand lane. That will automatically activate the gate on that lane with the license plate reader. So we did take that into account. We're doubling the capacity there that we now have up to the point of the gatehouse. But John Hart, our traffic expert, will testify about that.
Okay, I'll follow up with him. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
But from an engineering perspective, based on the grading, you've positioned the gatehouse as far into the site as you feel comfortable with?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to squeeze a couple more feet, I probably could, but the grades become prohibitive.
So
So,
a couple more feet won't get you another vehicle or stacking.
no, I don't think so.
And I'll defer to our board engineer for further, but just wanted to confirm.
Mr. Stricker, one small point on C306, if you would. There's a note on C306 that says to the left-hand side of the sheet, limited proposed concrete walk, where we know on other sheets it goes all the way to the corner of Southgate. Which is it?
I'm sorry. read that note again, please,
There's a
Jeff?
note on C306 that, and it's the enlargement plan, site plan E, where it shows a limit of proposed concrete sidewalk heading west. And it stops, looks like maybe 100 or so feet past the exit egress drive of the main gate. It says limit of proposed concrete sidewalk. Where we've seen on other sheets, known from early testimony and elsewhere, that the new sidewalk is going to go all the way to the corner of Southgate. Can you,
I know what you're saying.
can
Okay,
you comment on that?
Yeah, I think that's, I think the intention of that note is cutting in the new sidewalk to accommodate the new driveway. So as we work through the grades in that area, we need to reconstruct portions of the sidewalk, and that's the limit of that reconstruct. There is an existing sidewalk across that frontage. But to your point, we are proposing a continuous sidewalk
Okay.
along
Right.
Southgate and Mountain.
I was confused.
I'm sorry for confusing you. I apologize.
That's okay.
Okay. Back to A3 if we could, Tyler. Just a couple more things if the board is patient for me to continue. The grading, I talked about some of the retaining walls that we had previously and how extensive they were. One of the more extensive ones was on the ring road, kind of in front of that detention basin that you see. The grade from neighborhood 1 to neighborhood 2 is quite steep. We had, because we're so restricted, we had one wall that reached a peak of almost 28 to 30 feet tall in that area. It was, 28 to 30 feet. I apologize. In this case, now that we've pulled it away, we can do a much better wall in this area. We have 16 feet in total height split between two walls. So 2 8-foot walls that are terraced. We have the ability to plant between those two walls, in front of it, behind it. So it's a much better system. And throughout the rest of the site, the retaining walls are significantly reduced. Last time we talked about importing in excess of 20,000 yards to accommodate the design. At this point, we're basically at zero import. So we were able to balance the site off very well. Now that we have the room to grade and we don't need retaining walls everywhere, we're able to make that accommodation. Drainage is another significant issue on the property. We had received, since we were last in front of you, we received our permits from the DEP on the prior application that included maintaining the existing basin because wetlands was established in the bottom. So we got a permit to scrape out the sediment from the bottom of the basin. We got permits for impacts to wetlands and transition areas around those isolated wetlands that are located around the basin. And when this was brought to us, we immediately went to DEP because they were in the middle of rule changes. And told them what we were doing, explained it, laid it out, and we got concurrence from DEP that our prior approval would be grandfathered and that they would look at this as an amendment to that plan, to that approval, rather. So we filed that with the DEP. We also conferred with your engineer and sent her all the permits and approvals and the correspondence that we had with the DEP that confirmed this. So that's filed, and we're waiting for that to come in. There were a number of comments on drainage design, some of it related to green infrastructure, which isn't really applicable. Other ones, we've accommodated the vast majority of those, and the ones that we didn't finish completely, we intend to. So we have no issue with the grading notes or comments from Mazer on the site. The only condition of the DP approval of note was in terms of threatened and endangered species. And this is, I'm sure you know, it's an Indiana bat area. That was the only T&E that came up with the DP through the course of their review. And the restriction on that is no tree removal from April to September during those periods. Otherwise, the wetlands on the site have a 50-foot transition area. It's an intermediate resource wetland, so no impacts from threatened and endangered. And I think that was a comment or a question in somebody's review letter. I apologize, I can't remember whose.
During what months?
April to September. Utilities, very similar to what we had before. We have loop systems for water and electric around the ring road. We're tying in neighborhood 1 and connecting it into infrastructure that's out on Mountain Avenue. So that completes a water loop, which will improve fire flow and capacity through those systems. Sanitary, as we talked about initially on the prior application, is ultimately going to discharge into the sewer line that's within Ryder Way and Southgate as it heads further to the north. We're working with the sewer department on how that actually occurs in terms of a grinder for wastewater coming off of the property, and we're working through those details, but we're not arguing that at all. One thing that we are going to do is install a sewer meter on neighborhood 1, because there was, if you recall, neighborhood 1 had a sewer meter on it, and we're just looking at how much flow is actually generated. We're just confirming the results of that initial meter. But otherwise, everything is available, ready for us to use, and we're going through the permitting process on those.
Is it natural gas on site or is it all electric?
The units are all electric. There is natural gas available. And I don't know that anything is using natural gas, nothing within the units. From a site lighting standpoint, virtually the same exact fixtures and arrangement and configuration that you had approved previously. They're 20-foot tall LED lights. There's 60 of them on the property. We use house side shields around the perimeter. These lights are downward facing. As Tyler said, they're dark sky compliant. Downward throw where it is hitting the ground where we need to, as opposed to spilling all over the place. There's also a number of bollard lights that are utilized to highlight pedestrian areas and some of the parking areas where we didn't want to put a light pole in front of someone's residence. Also decorative column lights throughout the pathways and some of the amenity areas through the site. Those are 11.5 feet tall, so pedestrian scale. We received a waiver for illumination off of the property line at the Southgate driveway. And I think your professional's correspondence is that new waiver is not required. We have the same exact configuration now. The foot candles and the amount of light being generated on the site. We talked about this a bit at the last application too. We have 0 foot candles for 248 feet from the residential property line on the north over to our site. So I hope I didn't confuse it with the way that I said that. There's 0 light spill for 248 feet from that northerly property line heading towards the site. So where the pond is, the trees and the vegetation, it's dark. Along Southgate right of way, 0 foot candles for a span of about 20 feet along that right of way frontage, except for the driveway, obviously. And along Mountain Avenue, that's 47 feet of 0 foot candles within our property. So we're really containing the light on site, again, downward facing.
So 248 you just referred to is 248 feet into our property.
Into our property.
There's still 0 foot candles still. So obviously at the boundary line, 248 feet away is also 0.
Very 0.
Right.
Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No.
The waiver that you were asking for before was for foot candle to exceed the foot candle requirements at the property line on Southgate.
At the driveway.
At the driveway, correct. But now that you're got this more enhanced driveway entrance on Mountain, I'm looking at your half a foot candle ISO bar here, and it goes into the middle of the Mountain Avenue. Is that going to be a waiver too?
It's an existing condition. I got 1.3 foot candles at Mountain Avenue.
Right.
So if a waiver is required, we would request that. Similar reasons that we requested the other waiver.
I think that should be a variance too, no?
So it would be a waiver if the
Lighting would be waiver,
Okay, well, but, call
but I have to look at.
So is that, are you modifying the lighting at the new Mountain Avenue?
It's physically going to be moved from one spot to the other because of the configuration.
Right.
So, I mean, if we do need a waiver, there's no residential over there. So it's not like Southgate where there were residents that were directly impacted. Mountain Avenue has lights on it. that run. So really our 1.3 foot candle is going to be lost in the illumination of the right of way.
I understand. I'm just thinking about driving, from darkness to pool to darkness to, uniformity more than anything else. If that's an issue, but then just clear that up and ask for another waiver.
And is the 1.3 foot candles also an existing condition? I think you just alluded to that.
I didn't review the existing photometric, so I can't tell you that
Got it.
for 100% certain, but there's lights at the driveway out there now.
Got it.
Mr. Sugar, I'm just, one thing, Mr. Sugar, I just want to, do you need a break? Do you need to stretch your fingers at all? Maybe some water? I just want to make sure you've been going 2 hours and 20 minutes strong.
She
So.
had a 2-minute break when Mr. Pantel went to speak to you.
All right. Okay.
I saw her sip some water.
All
and
right, I
stretch
just
her
wanted
fingers.
to be mindful of, yeah, sure.
Good one, man.
Keep an eye on it.
Okay. Landscaping.
Wait, before you move on.
Yes.
Any lighting proposed for the pickleball court?
No lights proposed at the pickleball court.
Okay. And while we're talking about the pickleball court.
Yeah.
Whose idea was it to put it in that location versus many other locations that could be on site?
I don't want to tell you whose idea it was, but it was, when
I'm the
the
chairman. I get an answer.
when the ring road moved away from the pond, right? It effectively created flat space that is really hard to come by on this property. So in terms of an opportunity to provide an amenity for the community, that was seen as a good spot.
I'm not so sure you talk to the owner of the house on Darby Court that he's going to think it's a good spot.
Well,
Because
one
he'll
of
be
the,
hearing,
I understand.
got that? Thank you.
Could you spell that?
Pretty good.
Phonetic.
I understand that. We have an exhibit that we'll bring up in a little bit to show how that's being treated, but that the intention for that, not the intention, it will not be overnight. It'll be daytime only.
But still, there's so much green space on that property to the south of, well, just north of Mountain Avenue, for instance. There's a big green space there, just to the south side of 2 point. Can't see the area there. 2.1 on the southeast corner of 2.1. There's space. I don't know. I'm just thinking. There's so much space there. Why do you have to put it close to one of the borough residences?
Well, our opinion is that it's not close. It's 291 feet away from the closest residential building, and 226 feet from the property line. It's not a public court. It's to be utilized by the residents, and during limited hours during the day.
You're limiting the hours during the day? Or you're limiting the hours to?
Limiting hours to daytime.
There's no lights.
I know.
No lights.
The other half of that area is a dog park as well. So that's what's being proposed on the other half. And I can pull that exhibit up in a minute. Landscaping, very similar to what we had before on site, both in terms of impacts to existing trees and the plantings that are being proposed to mitigate those impacts. We meet ordinance requirements in terms of street trees, number of trees required within parking areas, and we actually exceed those by quite a bit. Our plan that was submitted, the Bowler plan that was submitted, the intention of that was to demonstrate compliance with the code, and we've done that. LSG, as the landscape architect for the project, is going to supplement those plantings above and beyond what you see on the screen here. Indicative and aligned with what is over in Neighborhood 1. If you've been through the site, it's a beautiful site, and they are going to similarly plant and improve those areas. There are distinct locations of tree saves that are on the property that we should note. First off, between Neighborhood 1 and Neighborhood 2, where A31 is written, that is a tree save area, and really that area is so steep that we really can't get into it anyway if we wanted to. Those trees are there, they're holding the slope, and we're going to leave them alone. Around the north side of the pond, that extensive wooded area is going to remain. We're not going into that except for to clear out the basin, but those trees will remain. Likewise, around the perimeter of the site, coming southbound on Southgate, past right-of-way on Southgate, maintaining those trees around the perimeter and along Mountain Avenue as well. We talked about the grading that's involved with the ring road through that same section I just talked about. Those are going to impact trees, and it's impacting basically the same trees that we impacted with the last application. That road is pretty much locked in where it is. So there really isn't much of a change there. There's a few more trees that we're impacting now. There may have been trees in that area that were ash trees that were damaged over the last couple of years that need to come down anyway, but those will be supplemented with new plantings. Altogether, the prior approval was for 456 new trees proposed, and we would hit that mark with this plan. And also, if you look closely on here around parking areas, we're not showing shrubs and bushes and ornamental annuals and perennials on the plan. These are just strictly trees that we're showing. Again, LSG will be up after me, and they will talk about some of their planting schemes to further enhance what we have here. If we go to A12, A12 should be the pickleball court. That's in the next. Okay. So Exhibit A12 was prepared by LSG. It's titled Enlargement Dog Park and Pickleball Court. And the date on this is, do you have that, Clark?
Yes.
Today.
It's actually not dated, but on the exhibit itself, we've labeled it A12 with today's date in the lower right-hand corner.
So this shows the proposed retaining walls kind of wrapping around. This is the same retaining wall that we need to construct the roadway from neighborhood 1. We have the pickleball court on the right-hand side of the exhibit and dog park on the left. In between them is a shade structure for, to serve either side. There is a lay-by parking area that's shown in that spot as well, one parking space. Just really convenience if somebody comes down and they can't make the walk from the parking lot across the street. It's a convenience for them. The pickleball court, obviously we're aware of concerns with respect to how that operates. Again, like we said, we feel the dimension of excess of 200 feet of existing vegetation in that area will help alleviate concerns with noise. Operation of the pickleball court will be during daytime periods, so not overnight while people are sleeping. Dog park is immediately adjacent to, you can see it's green, it's planted, the shade trees around all of these facilities. And again, when LSG comes in to give their testimony, they can get into some more of the details. One of the other things in terms of amenity spaces, if you saw on our overall plan, we have, similar to last time, we have green areas that are blocked out and we noted as future amenity spaces and final design to be provided prior to construction. That's because the area really, the central courtyard between building 2.1 and 2.3 and 2.4, as well as the courtyard area between Life Enrichment and 2.2 up by Mountain Avenue. These are all areas that are special places. The design, frankly, is continuing to evolve. They're going to be enhanced, they're going to be beautiful, and they're being designed right now.
Could you just pull up A3 for a moment?
Before you do that, can you just zoom out? I just wanted to see what the key chart was. Curious what 6 was. Oh, that's just a shade structure?
Yeah.
For the trellis?
I thought it was
Like a
a,
trail.
Yeah, it's a shade structure with seating.
cage to keep your dog while you go back inside your,
Play
The
pickleball.
pickleball.
yeah.
That's
Or
where
the
they keep,
looser the pickleball goes inside.
that's where they keep the pickles.
What is number 7 on the diagram? That blue little
7
box?
is a proposed shade sail with seating. So that's another shade feature.
That was inside the dog park.
So it'll have some sort of a fabric covered affair, so I called a sail.
One thing that we did take into consideration with this, right? We understand we're asking the board for flexibility, but what we did in our stormwater design was that we've overcompensated for impervious. We are accommodating an additional 35,000 square feet of impervious in our stormwater system that's not shown on the plans today. That's why through the course of the last iteration of plans that came in right before this meeting that your professionals reviewed, it was noted that some of the sidewalks changed, but you didn't update your impervious cover number. The reason why we didn't is that the change was very, very small, and we knew we had 35,000 square feet additional banked into the stormwater design. And we think that's going to give us the flexibility when, the landscape architect comes up with something interesting and wants to, we don't want to have to go back to the DEP or the board for that type of stuff.
It's 35,000 square feet against a total of what? I mean, to show what in percentage scale, what we're talking about, 2%.
We have 445,000 square feet.
Less than
So
1%,
yeah, it's
No.
less than a tenth of 1%.
No.
Less than a hundredth of 1%.
No, go. Absolutely not. Just listen again, please. What's the total impervious coverage?
the total impervious coverage is 445,590 square feet.
Right, so it's about roughly 8%. 35,000 square feet of that number would be roughly 8% to play with. That's not trivial.
Okay.
So the 41.54% lot coverage, that you're asking for, that gives you flexibility to design the courtyard without having to come back here.
We hope so.
And if it
That's
doesn't,
our
we'll see you again then.
Right,
So-
and obviously we're well below the 60 that's
Of
permitted.
course, Yeah.
So we are over designing our stormwater system.
I wanted you just to take a quick look at A3 because it has one feature on it I think worth commenting on in terms of community benefit and aesthetics, which is the amphitheater, outdoor amphitheater. Could you point that out on A3 or A3.1? There you go. And maybe zoom in just a little bit. Yeah, so could you just describe that, Rob?
Yes, if you look at A3, that circular feature that's kind of in the middle between 2.3, 2.4, and 2.1, that's where the amphitheater is proposed to be located. Again, like Tyler said, it's a gathering place and a place for outdoor activities for the community. It's been done in other communities by Erickson as well, and it's very successful.
That's not finalized yet. I think you were saying that that's one of those areas that's still being designed.
Yes, this is exactly one of those areas that are still under design.
Just because when I look at the grading plan, those
We're just
slopes
grading
are-
straight through it.
Are pretty steep at that
Right,
point.
yeah, we're grading through it. There'll be a system of ramps, and really the curvy sidewalks allow us to work with the grade to slowly transition down, so we can get residents up and down through that area without steps and,
Because currently there's some steps shown on. Earth
yeah, there's a
Day.
couple steps, yes, but around the perimeter, around the outside, the goal is to have that work from an ADA standpoint, so they don't, so they don't really need a ramp, or they don't need, so they can get through there one way or another.
One
So
other,
the idea is correct on there, but the execution of it is, the board should know that that's not what it's gonna look like.
Not exactly,
There,
no.
there's gonna have to be some changes to make the ADA work.
Right.
But that's the general idea.
Correct. I think if we could pull up C104, I promised the board I'm almost done. C104 is the phasing plan from the drawings that were submitted to the board, and I just want to highlight this for you and get it on the record. Similar to the last application or last approval you guys had, we're proposing to phase the construction of this. So the initial phase will include building 2.1 and 2.2. Those are the buildings that front on Mountain. It will also include the work that needs to be done for the basin and the stormwater management system, as well as the ring road and a lot of the infrastructure. When we come in and build the remaining two buildings, they'll almost be treated like a pad site in a larger development. So the infrastructure around it will be in place. We'll simply have to construct what's going on in between. That amphitheater area that we were just talking about is designated as phase 4. That's really in the middle of all the construction that would be going on. So that would be finished off at the end is our thought now. Similar to last time, we begged for flexibility with this. Depending on how construction goes, may start one building versus the other, may build an amenity before another building, but clearly we're planning on doing this in phases. And we plan on building the site out, and while some of the buildings are occupied, and that's what was done for neighborhood 1. So it would be a similar request here.
So, Mr. Oh, sorry.
Mr. Stricker, what do you anticipate a total build out from beginning to end?
In terms of timing,
1 year, 2 year, 3 year?
I mean, to get everything built out, just thinking of what occurred on neighborhood 1, it's
Right.
multiple years to get that
Once
done.
construction starts, would you anticipate it going nonstop until it was complete? Suppose you build phase 1 in 1.5 and then stop it. Would you stop
Ye-
at 2 years or?
Yeah, I think I can respond to that. I don't
Yeah.
think we can say that at this point with certainty. Obviously, we'd like to build sooner rather than later. But needless to say, the market could always have something else to say about that. It's to nobody's benefit if we're building and there's no demand, inability to have the units occupied. So
Conversely, you don't want to have a half-built site for a long time.
Of
either.
of course, clearly, but at this point, we just can't commit to a finite timeline or commit to building constantly throughout. We have to be careful about how we proceed with that. Obviously, for that matter, construction financing doesn't happen if under certain market conditions. So we do need flexibility, as we had with the development of the CCRC to date. I mean, you
Right.
can see that we're not about sitting. We don't do well by sitting our hands and doing nothing. You can see from what the presentation tonight that a lot of effort and capital, for that matter, has gone into putting this plan together. So the intention is to realize that investment and proceed.
Mr. Pintel, one of just clarification. I think you'd stated that maybe it's before phase 1, the road work on Mountain Avenue is complete, or is that before phase 1 opens to for residential living?
I think what we indicated is that we would be developing, installing landscaping early.
I did left-hand turn lane off Mountain Avenue. I thought you said that was going.
The left turn lane off of Mountain Avenue, we indicated would be before occupancy or in connection
Okay,
with
before-
occupancy of the third building.
Of the third building.
Third
Okay.
building.
I just wanted to clarify that. Thank
Sure.
you.
Same as what was stipulated in the prior approval.
Okay, and then just lastly, signage. There's an existing sign out on Mountain Avenue at the existing driveway. When we reconstruct the driveway, obviously the sign needs to move. It's going to move into that center island. It won't be the same sign because it's, masonry. So that's going to come out, but it'll be replaced with a sign that's very similar. At the corner of Mountain and Southgate, we're proposing the sign. That's the sign we talked about the last time. One of the board's requirements was to move it a couple hundred feet. I think it was 100 or 200 feet to the east down Mountain Avenue, and that was to discourage people from going to Southgate and using that as an entry. So we have the same sign proposed. In lieu of that, we've added the text to note, access left turn ahead on the sign. And it's a single-sided sign, so it sits on the corner and faces the approaching traffic in the eastbound direction on Mountain Avenue. So it's really serving those people who approach from that direction,
And
giving them guidance to the driveway down the
Yeah,
street.
and it clearly will advise that Lantern Hill is next left,
Next left.
so.
Can I just ask another quick question? I'm just thought of this right now, and it's important, I think. During the construction of all these phases, there's going to be an awful lot of construction vehicles coming on site, and there's going to be no arms to right of way or Southgate, or South Street. Where the construction vehicle is going to be entering during all phases of construction?
Good question.
It's a good question. We would have to talk to the contractor about that. I think during the demo, they were utilizing a Southgate driveway as their primary access point. I don't know if that works for everybody. It is out of the way and it's separate from the folks who are in neighborhood 1. So from that point of view, it's preferred, I'm sure, by the contractor.
Well, it brings up, it just goes back to what I just asked Mr. Pintel about. Maybe it is beneficial to have the Mountain Avenue road work done before construction begins. So I couldn't imagine all those construction vehicles on a 40-mile-an-hour road trying to make right and lefts into the complex. Just something to think about.
Okay.
Maybe it's traffic study or something, but I think it's important.
You're going to build the ring road when?
During phase 1.
During phase 1?
Yeah.
And so couldn't you keep the existing Mountain Avenue exit an entrance onto that property for construction so that you're not going down Southgate and therefore tempting people to go down into a residential neighborhood? I mean,
I agree with you, but I also think
just
the
curious,
amount
which
of
was better?
construction vehicles on Mountain Avenue on a 40-hour road, when you get dump trucks that go 10 miles an hour, maybe it'd be beneficial to have the road work done before you start phase 1, before you start construction.
You mean the left turn
Well,
lane?
let me ask
Yeah,
you,
the left turn.
let's ask Keith, when they were using Southgate for what they were prepping the site last time, how did that work out?
There wasn't a concern with that, you're right. It was a double wide entrance. Trucks could almost stage on Southgate. I think that the concern with that driveway from the borough's standpoint was we don't want people making the right-hand turn going down. But the construction traffic wasn't coming in that way. They were coming in from Mountain Ave, just using that construction access gate that was existing, and the gate is there today.
Yeah.
You're right, through the whole demolition process, it was restricted to only that south gate.
Right.
Yeah, that might be actually better
Really
than
lends
Mountain
itself
Avenue.
well to be maintained from that aspect.
Because remember the dump trucks queuing up on South Street? Like 40 in a row? That was bad.
Yeah, well, 2 points in that regard. One, remember our soil importation has gone from 20,000 yards to close to 0. That's a huge difference in terms of number of trucks, considering a typical dump load, maybe about 20 yards. Maybe, so that could be 1,000 fewer trucks coming to import soil, number one. Number two, to go to the point that Mr. Ping just raised and Mr. Lynch's good comment on that, I think what we could do is agree to have our construction vehicles using that Southgate driveway, but make it clear, no right turns allowed, and we could instruct our construction vehicles to access that Southgate driveway from Mountain Avenue as a good measure. I don't think it's viable to do the whole left turn lane later, what's going on with the county before construction starts. But I think we can do what I just indicated with respect to directing construction traffic.
Well, that's obviously the very big concern is any construction vehicle inadvertently taking a right and going down Southgate through the.
Understood. So we can sign that clearly, give instructions to them clearly. I don't think it was a problem previously. We didn't hear about any complaints, but we have no problem enforcing that. People just have to go a little more circuitous route. That's their issue. It's not a problem for
I
us.
think that's a big enough deal
Yeah.
like a stipulation.
Is having all those trucks queuing up.
No.
If they end up going
like
down
that.
Southgate,
I think that's-
And that way, and you have a signal, that's Mountain Avenue and South and Southgate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's gotta be a stipulation.
I'd like to ask a question regarding sidewalks. If I'm reading the plans correctly, there is no sidewalk planned for Southgate on the westerly side that runs between Mountain Avenue and Southgate that runs downhill. Is that correct? Or is that incorrect?
We're proposing a sidewalk on our side of Southgate.
You are all the way down from Mountain
Yes.
down to
Yeah,
the
the
other
east side.
corner of Southgate?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't see that.
I think it's actually like
I
underneath,
think it's under the red line.
it's underneath the lines.
Okay, that's why I didn't see it.
Yeah, but we are proposing a sidewalk there. That's the direct testimony I have, Glenn, unless I missed something you want me to go over. We could go over the professionals' letters.
Yeah, sure. Just one other item, though, maybe it would be actually for Tyler, just to confirm, because we have someone here from Emergency Services with respect to the radio reception within the buildings. It's my understanding that for building, for neighborhood 2, we will be, as a matter of compliance with code, for sure addressing full emergency radio reception within all buildings in neighborhood 2. And apparently in neighborhood 1, there's been some dead spots. It wasn't a code requirement when neighborhood 1 was built to address that issue. So we are committed to assessing where any dead spots might be. So two-way radios and the like used by emergency responders would have complete radio access throughout neighborhood 1 as well as in neighborhood 2. So it's our intention to address that and do testing to identify any dead spots and put in the necessary measures to eliminate any such dead spots.
And you would do that how?
We would do that, we're making arrangements for a company, actually, I believe they're supposed to be on the site by about on or around September 11th to do appropriate testing and identify any dead spots or areas where you have less than acceptable reception, and they'd be in a position to recommend, technical fixes to assure that we would have good reception.
So like micro transmitters or repeaters or something like that?
So you're committed to doing the testing? Are you committed to, when the results say, yes, there is an issue, we'll rectify that?
Yes.
That's, okay. We're
Yes.
taking it.
We're not going to just test and then ignore the test results.
Anyone have any other questions?
Test
for Mr.
says, oh,
Speck?
well.
Yeah, I just have one question.
Right now. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. So for the attorney, I'm sorry. So who on your team or of your witnesses will be addressing in depth some of the letters from Chief Henn and others about the emergency services? Is that something we should address right now?
Well, I think we have addressed the 24/7 access issue. We just addressed the radio reception issue. The other main item that was raised in those reports is ambulance service, which we intend to address at the next meeting.
Okay, because that was my biggest issue. So
Yeah.
And who of your witnesses will be the best to address that?
We'll either have somebody from regional VP, from Erickson, or perhaps somebody from the ambulance service provider. We're in the process of finalizing that.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, Chief Henn in his letter said he would recommend that the police department have an opportunity to be questioned by the board. So I definitely want to see what we can do to make sure that happens as well. Maybe in connection with your
Yeah,
witnesses.
well, I understand that he will be at the next meeting. He
Fantastic.
couldn't be here tonight. I
Okay.
think he's on vacation. So
Thank you.
we will all be here
Okay.
to respond to any questions that he has. And we actually have already met. We haven't just received the letters. We've had 2 virtual meetings, WebEx, Zoom meetings with Chief Henn and our people who are on the point for that ambulance service issue. And I intend to try to have at least one more now that I think we have developed a very good solution to that concern. But I don't want to get ahead of myself on that. I'd rather we'll present that at the next meeting. But I'm confident that we'll have a very good solution.
Okay, but if we, and I don't know if this is a question for Amanda or the chairman, I'm sorry, but if we want to, because, if Chief Henn is here but does not, just kind of walks up as a citizen or, just walks up, I don't know then if we can question him in that capacity, do we have to, in other words, I want to make sure we can ask questions to the chief of police, so that's something we can do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if my memory is correct, I think we did that last time.
Yeah.
in 2021.
Yeah.
We
So-
can question him just like any of our other.
Yeah, we
Yes.
can call him in as a witness,
A
or an
witness, yeah.
expert, just like we are.
Right, well, I
Yeah.
haven't seen that yet, so I just want to double check, because obviously he's not on
And-
your witness list per se, but.
Yeah, no, you're right on the mark, because we did it last time, so
Yeah.
we'll
Okay,
definitely
because I
get
thought,
it.
that was the last line in this thing, and I think that's something we should definitely.
And our intention is to meet again with him before the next meeting, and hopefully all get on the same page on the issue. But in any event, we'll be prepared at the next meeting to address that ambulance service point. We fully understand it. So as I said, I don't want to get ahead of myself on it by.
Sure, no problem,
Yes,
just wanted to
that
double check, thank you.
Sure.
Can I just get any audience members anyone have any questions of Mr. Strecker right now?
Unless you
Right, got one behind you. Why don't you step aside, Mr. Strecker, let him get to the microphone for a minute.
Sorry, this is redundant. This is David Kaiser, 228 Southgate Road. So just referring to Mr. Strecker's comment that all the buildings are within compliance of the height ordinance. Again, just identify which specific ordinance that is and articulate how each building is in compliance.
Well, I read through the number of stories and the building height elevations through my testimony. Glenn, I think there's language in that definition that wasn't put on the record before. So the principal structure height in total contains no more than 40%. This was omitted. Devoted to human habitation is the kicker.
Just one second. Sure.
You got a break.
So, in light of the ordinance, can you respond to the question that was just in compliance with the height provisions of the ordinance?
Yeah, I think we comply fully with the ordinance requirement. The provision that was cited and questioned is,
Here, just one second. Just to give you the citation, it's section 310-42 point capital letter D, which includes a table which lays out maximum building height. Includes that maximum height for a principal structure is 80 feet, measured to the highest point of the roof and from the finished floor elevation immediately above the highest partial building level. And then also defines the maximum number of stories at 6 and has language that guides one in determining the number of stories. So you want to comment on that definition?
yes, the definition says 6 stories exclusive of up to 2 partial building levels below the 6 stories of the structure. And a building level shall be deemed to be a partial building level and not a story if X, its floor area devoted to human habitation and excluding the floor area of parking facilities contains no more than 40% of the floor area of the footprint of the building of which it is a part. That nuance was left out during the prior question. So it speaks to habitation. If you have rooms or you have occupancy of the garage floor of 40%, then it's not a partial floor. So that's why what we said before is accurate. We comply.
Right, so in other words, if where the floor area is devoted to human habitation contains no more than 40% of the floor area, the footprint of the building, it does not count as a story, correct?
Correct.
And we comply with that, number one. Secondly, no more than 50% of the total area of the perimeter elevations of a partial level is to be exposed, i.e. visible from the outside.
We comply with that.
Comply with that. And then thirdly, none of the exposed elevations are to face Mountain Avenue.
We comply with that.
Comply with that as well. So therefore, those partial building levels that you have, up to 2 partial building levels, may be within the building. They do not count toward the 6 stories.
Correct.
Correct? And then lastly, the maximum height that's permitted under this section of the ordinance is 80 feet, measured to the highest point of the roof and from the finished floor elevation immediately above the highest partial building level.
Correct.
And is that when you gave the height dimensions, is that how, are those height dimensions given to provide the height under this section of the ordinance?
Yes.
So those height dimensions were the distance measured to the highest point of the roof from the finished floor elevation immediately above the highest partial building level. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. White, you had a question?
If it's easier for the board to swear me in next time, I can have, I guess, a different dialogue with you. Otherwise, I do have some questions just to, I was gonna go off of since I'm limited to questions at this time.
Same thing. Will there be an opportunity to ask Mr. Stecker questions at the next meeting?
Will you be at the next meeting?
He'll be here, I assume. I don't know that for a fact. But if you
I
have
mean-
questions of him now, that's what we're here for.
Oh.
I'm asking, we're looking
I
to ask
thought-
questions.
I
Mr.
didn't-
Wyko happens to be employed by the borough and the fire department, and his questions are going to be probably a lot different than your questions right now. So he's wondering whether he needs to be sworn in as a witness.
No, I thought this ended at 11.
No.
No.
I'm my mistake.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if he,
So you're just discussing, why don't we let the residents ask their questions, then we'll swear you in next time.
Perfect. Yeah, Chief Henn and I have this similar thought, so
Then let's do it next.
it would go together.
I was gonna say, it might make sense for them to be in front of you together. So,
Right.
Yeah. 'cause
That would be-
You'll overlap.
Great.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So you had a question? Come on up.
But just to confirm, Mr. Strecker, will you be here at the next meeting?
I will.
You will now.
Good answer. Good answer.
Your name and address, please.
My name is Carol Pasquale. I'm a resident at Lantern Hill, 535 Mountain Avenue.
Your question, Mr.
My question, I apologize because it may have been answered, but people didn't use their microphones so that we could hear them. I had a question from Mr. Stecker about the roads, particularly the ring road and the entrance from the gated area. And he may have answered this and I didn't hear it. It sounded to me like all of the commercial traffic, well, first of all, let's take note of the fact that we are going to double the size of what is there now. We're going to be double the size of what is there now. The question is, does all of the commercial traffic coming in have to go right around the ring road? I couldn't determine if that was correct or not. It's
If they're going in a clockwise direction?
yes. Are they only going clockwise, or can they go in either direction?
He testified that they could go in either direction.
Thank you.
Clockwise or clockwise.
Okay. And is there room on the road for 2 18-wheelers, I suppose, to pass one another on this ring road?
To answer your question.
Yes.
Okay. That was the question. That was the question I had. I did not hear, I know there was a question about the loading zones for neighborhood 2, and I'm sure it was answered, but I couldn't hear what he had to say. Where are the loading zones for the mail truck and the Amazon truck and all those things that are currently parking in our fire lane? Are there designated loading zones?
Yeah, we do have designated loading zones. It's on the west side of building 2.1.
Maybe go back to 3.1 exhibit.
Yes.
3.1. And if we need to mark it up some more.
we're zooming in on this so you can see where the location is, but the loading zone is on the west side of 2.1.
Could you use the microphone a little closer to your mouth, please?
Speak up.
Okay. So it's on the west side of building 2.1. Tyler is indicating with the mouse where that is located. It's just underneath where the H is on this marked up exhibit. That's the loading area.
That's for the food trucks.
That's for the trucks. Additional smaller deliveries that you were talking about, such as Amazon or small one-time deliveries. There's a lay-by area to the left of the canopy at the front door of 2.1. That's a designated area for those type of interactions.
Okay.
Mr. Pento, will there be somebody at the next meeting, maybe a regional manager from Erickson, to maybe address some of the concerns of phase one and where they're parking in fire lanes, and how will that stop for phase two? How are you guys going to address that? So the Amazon trucks, the food trucks don't park in fire lanes.
Yeah, we can.
Just
certainly-
might be beneficial to have somebody here to
Yeah, I
address
can
that.
certainly look into that.
Any other questions from the audience?
Have
Again,
you
this is
heard that, sir?
specifically of the testimony you just heard from Mr. Strecker. Yes? Okay. Mr. Strecker, you got to back down for a minute.
Okay.
I'm going to the microphone because I don't hear either.
Thank you.
Scan your name and address.
Thank you,
please.
Alan Swanson, 47 Overhill Road. I have this was a really huge amount of information, so that the number of questions are huge. However, I'm not going to ask a lot of questions, but I do have a couple. There was mention about the units being electric, but I want to mention in the environmental statement.
This should be a question, not a comment.
Okay, well, I need to give the quote from the environmental statement in order to ask the question.
Okay, sure.
It states air quality is anticipated to be primarily impacted by vehicular traffic along Mountain Avenue, and overall the proposed retirement community is not anticipated to result in any significant impact to air quality. What's the heating system at the unit at the neighborhood 2?
It's called a variable refrigerant flow. It's basically a glorified furnace in your house. It has compressors up on the roof.
Natural gas.
Correct.
Okay. Will you revise the statement that the primary air quality issue will be vehicular traffic? Because if you're heating a 444 plus perhaps more units with natural gas, you're going to have a significant impact on air quality in the area. That's my question. Will you take that into account? Or will you revise it says that you're only going to have vehicular.
Yeah, I think Rob Strecker can respond to the comment about the EIS. Rob, can you come forward, use the mic, please?
We'll evaluate the question and take another look at it. I don't have the answer right now.
When you look at it, please, will you look at the possibility of putting in heat pump technology?
That's really not my purview. I'm the civil engineer.
And by the way, I'd like to add that there's been no competent testimony or evidence to suggest that the proposed heating system will have any adverse impact on air quality. This gentleman seems to presuppose that that's the case. We are certainly not presupposing that that's the case.
You have another question, Mr. Swanson?
May I comment on this? I mean, I'm not
It's
presupposing
ready for
anything.
comment.
If you burn
Excuse me,
gas.
that's in the nature of a comment. There's a time for comments at the end of the hearing, sir.
Okay, thank you. I have a question about the EV. Thank you for the question. will you create a plan for after 2035 when combustion engine cars will no longer be permitted to be purchased in New Jersey in terms of the number of chargers?
We've already testified that we will take into account comment that was raised earlier about the potential to have more than 6% of the spaces be devoted to EV, and we will get back to the board on that.
Thank you. Will you create an emergency plan that will accommodate the number of emergency vehicles that would respond to a fire at neighborhood 2 or neighborhood 1, given that within the last week or two, about 200 feet down the road, a single house was on fire, and there were at least six municipalities that responded with fire equipment and EMS, including Plainfield.
So what's the question?
Well, will there be a creation of an emergency plan that can accommodate that number of vehicles?
What number?
Well, I assume 6 municipalities could be 12, 15. That doesn't take into account
Again,
the
that's
emergency.
supposition on your part. We don't know if that's a fact or not. We can't take that into any kind of consideration.
I'm asking, will it? I don't know either. It would seem like it's an issue that should be addressed, given that if we have a single house on fire in New Providence, we get at least 6
That might come up next
municipalities. I'm
Chief
sorry?
Wyko addresses and is a witness.
At our next hearing, we're
At
going
our
to
next hearing, our fire chief and chief of police will be here
Okay.
to
No, that'll be
provide
fine.
testimony.
Thank you.
And that might help answer that question.
I'm not trying to be difficult.
No.
These are serious questions. I'm not really.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
No, totally.
No, that'd be a better time to ask it next time.
There was a question over on this side of the room from someone before? Yes, sir.
John Peoples from Lantern Hill, 603 Mountain.
Please spell your last name for me, Peoples.
Speak into the microphone.
Please spell your last name for me.
People with an S.
Okay, thank you.
I believe I have some questions for you. I didn't ask them earlier because I wasn't sure of the flow of the meeting. But my understanding is that all of the HCUs in neighborhood 2 will be eliminated. Is that correct?
We're not proposing with a prior proposal to have 108 HCUs in a separate continuing care building in neighborhood 2. That's no longer part of this proposal. So we're not proposing construction of a separate continuing care building that would have had that number of HCUs. What we are proposing is that there could be in either neighborhood 1 or neighborhood 2, the conversion of up to 45 independent living units into 85 healthcare units. That could happen in either neighborhood 1 and or neighborhood 2.
So they will be scattered throughout neighborhood 1 or neighborhood 2. Presently, they're in a continuing care community. So I could expect to have somebody that's in assisted living or nursing living next to me in an independent unit.
Well, I think you also may have heard, or maybe you weren't able to hear due to microphones or whatever, that in response to a question that was raised by Mr. Morgan, as to whether or not, as to where those conversions would occur, would we create the equivalent of separate wings? And I indicated that the intention would be to do it in appropriate clusters, not in a patchwork quilt pattern where you would have just isolated 2 or 3 HCUs converted to ILUs scattered throughout the campus. That's not the intention.
Generally, they're accompanied with a restaurant or a place to eat. So how will that be accommodated within neighborhood 1?
When you say they are accommodated with the restaurant.
Well, a unit or a cluster of units will have their separate place.
For healthcare units, you say?
Yeah, healthcare
Would
units.
have separate dining facilities. Again, they would have the same array of services as healthcare units are expected to have. So there would, when those conversions take place, that's something that would have to be addressed at that time.
So if there's a single person next to me and the restaurant's down in the center, then somebody will be moving a cart through the aisles with that food.
I'm not suggesting that. I think you're asking questions that really go beyond the scope of the testimony that we have provided tonight. It's a fair question regarding how the dining service is intended to accommodate the newly converted units that have now become healthcare units. And I think it's best that we respond to that at the next meeting, if that's okay.
Does that mean you don't have a direct answer now?
I don't have a direct answer now. That's correct.
Presently, the continuing care has one person overnight for 16 or 17 people, one attendant of some type, a nurse on duty. If somebody is removed far away, how would that person handling continuing care be expected to manage one person that's far removed?
Okay, so again, tonight we didn't present testimony regarding that level of specificity regarding the operation of the new healthcare units. So I appreciate the spirit of your questions and the nature of your questions. So I'm sure that we can have more specific information about that subject at the next meeting. And I think from even the couple questions that you just asked, I think you have a good idea about the sort of concern that you have in that regard. Yeah, I'd like to have additional testimony on that issue.
All right, what is the accepted ratio of ILUs to HCUs?
Yeah, Erickson again can respond to that at the next meeting.
So if you eliminate these additional spots, you may not be meeting that ratio.
No, the intention is clearly to meet the needs of all of the residents, and that's what we intend to do. And we have had internal discussions along those lines, and we definitely will be in a position to present some more information about how that is happening and will continue to happen.
One more question that you can address for next time. I know that there are independent living units adjacent to present continuing care. That seems to be the logical point at which you would expand into for additional continuing care. Would present independent living residents be encouraged to vacate those units?
Again,
Okay.
that was beyond the scope of what was presented tonight.
I didn't really see it beyond the scope, but
Well, there was no testimony to that effect tonight at all.
Right.
But now that you asked the questions, Mr. Pantel said.
but the
to
fact
build it
that you're
back to
eliminating units
Right.
would bring about these questions that I need to be addressed, whether he could address them now or next
No, I
time.
said it's a good idea to have those questions now so that he can prepare for next
Yeah.
time.
Okay, there are many others, but I'll let it go with that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the audience? Okay, yes. One more.
Sorry, just again, in regards to the height ordinance, so what's posted on the town website is real different than what was just read out today. So if we could just confirm what the proper language is for the height ordinance?
And I can clarify that because
Yeah.
I thought that might be an issue.
Thank
So
you.
the original ordinance that was adopted was ordinance 2019-07, which I think is what you referred to.
Yeah.
It was amended later that year by ordinance 2019-12. Since that time, the entire ordinance has been codified. In November of 2020, all of the final language was adopted in one place. I believe that final ordinance is on the website, but it hasn't made its, as a PDF, but it hasn't made its way to the E-code site.
Okay.
So if you contact the clerk or our secretary, they can point you in the direction of all of that final language.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Pantel, I think we can wrap it up tonight if you don't mind.
That's fine. We appreciate that. We appreciate definitely the board's attention and good questions and comments from the board as well as from the public. So I guess we just need a formal announcement about where we're going to, when and where we'll convene next so that we have no further notice required.
Right, we will convene right in this room in 2 weeks on a Monday evening. The date is Was it
September 11th.
September 11th?
September
8
11th
o'clock,
at 8 PM in this
this
location.
location, with no further notice required.
Great. Thank you very much.
Can I just confirm that we're going to have some additional testimony about the review letter that I did? There were just some other questions which we haven't covered yet, and I just want
Yeah,
clarification,
sure.
maybe to get on the record.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Not a problem.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, for our board members, we still have a couple of different items to go over. Real specifically, Margaret's minutes from August 7th.
I read them and they were swell. I vote we approve them as submitted.
Sorry, I just have.
Second.
Sorry, can I make one, I hate to do this, but I don't have the minutes in front of me, but I believe one of the resolutions said that Mitch and I voted on it, but
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
yeah, one of the resolutions in the minutes
Mhm.
said that Mitch and I voted on it, but I don't think Mitch was here and I wasn't here. Can we just double check on the minutes?
I'll check.
Okay,